Bleach. Studying medicine can't save the spirit world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 576. Candidates going to Karakura town. Accompanied by a few coughs from time to time, the words spoken by Ukichi Joshiro made the captains present frown. Although this time the King's Seal incident also caused extremely serious damage to the Seireitei, one of the main reasons for such serious consequences was related to Tsunoshiro Tokinada. Therefore, what the GOTY 13 faced this time was completely the rampage of the King's Seal and the rebellion of the Tsunoshiro family. However, all this is still incomparable to Aizen Sasuke. If it is said that when Aizen Sasuke led many Yaranses to rebel against the Seireitei before, the strength shown by Aizen Sasuke was not to the point of making people feel desperate. The reason why the GOTY 13 regarded Aizen Sasuke as a big enemy at the time was not only because he had many Yaranses under his command, but also because of the Shinigami. However, in the King's Seal incident, in addition to killing Tsunoshiro Tokinada with overwhelming strength, Aizen Sasuke also instantly killed 3 captains at the same time with Hector's 90 decimeters. Black Coffin. This terrifying strength has undoubtedly opened up a huge gap between him and ordinary captains. In the solemn eyes of many captains, Ukichi Joshiro coughed several times, his face seemed to be getting paler, and then he continued. Aizen Sasuke has never really started a war, I'm afraid it's just as you guessed. This statement undoubtedly made many captains show their approval. Only Zaraka Kinpachi's face was full of confusion. Obviously he had no guesses in his heart. Then, Zaraka Kinpachi, who was slow to realize it, felt that he seemed to have been insulted in some way. His face turned black, and he said, Ukichi, don't play dumb here, tell me your guess, let me see if it's the same as what I think. Ukichi Joshiro was slightly startled, and then he spoke. According to Uehara Kisuke, it will take time for Aizen Sasuke to completely fuse the 2 pieces of Hogyoku, and as the former captain of the 5th Division, Aizen Sasuke has a good understanding of the combat power and intelligence of the GOTY 13 Division. Therefore, in addition to waiting for the Hogyoku to completely fuse, Aizen Sasuke is probably also preparing for war based on our intelligence. Kinpachi Zaraka, with his arms crossed, nodded and said, just as I thought. Captains. In an instant, many captains couldn't help but twitch their mouths. Suddenly, Kinpachi Zaraka thought of something, licked his lips, and suggested impatiently. If you ask me, since Aizen Sasuke is not ready yet, how about we take the opportunity to take the initiative to attack Hukomundo? As soon as these words came out, the helpless expressions of the captains present became even more intense. Captain Zaraka, have you forgotten that for Aizen Sasuke, Hukomundo and Aransei are just his pawns? Kurosaki Mairi said sarcastically without hiding the contempt in his eyes. So when we attack Hukomundo with all our strength to eliminate Aizen Sasuke's pawns, and Aizen Sasuke chooses to attack the Seireitei or Karakura town, whose defenses have become empty, how should we deal with it? Zaraka Kinpachi said as a matter of course. Then hurry back and chop them all off. Idiot. Kurosaki Mairi commented. Zaraka Kinpachi said angrily. What did you say? Bastard. Idiot. Kurosaki Mairi still did not hide his contempt for the brainless muscle man. Believe it or not, I will chop you off right now. Zaraka Kinpachi. Seeing that a conflict was about to break out between Zaraka Kinpachi and Kurosaki Mairi, Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni knocked his cane heavily. Boom. Stop it. As Kinpachi Zaraka and Mairi Kurosaki finally stopped reluctantly, Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni turned to Ukichi Joshiro and continued to speak. Captain Ukichi, please continue to explain your opinion. Yes, Ukichi Joshiro took a deep breath and continued. Therefore, although he is reluctant to admit it, Aizen Sasuke does hold the absolute initiative in the war, and the GOTY 13 is forced to defend Karakura town and Seireitei at the same time. However, Aizen Sasuke's last appearance proved one thing from the side, that is, compared with Seireitei, Karakura town will be Aizen Sasuke's first target. At least before successfully creating the King Key in the Heavy Soul Land Karakura town and obtaining the key to the Soul King Palace, Aizen Sasuke will probably not target Seireitei. In this case, I think the GOTY 13 should shift the focus of defense from Seireitei to Karakura town. That's all. After saying that, Ukichi Joshiro retreated back into the team. Many captains, including Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni, also fell into thought about Ukichi Joshiro's suggestion. Although the existence of the World Gate and the different speed of time in the World Sun had meant that the GOTY 13 did not need too much time to reach Karakura town from the Seireitei, Yukita Jushiro's suggestion was undoubtedly worthy of attention. Knowing the enemy's goal, it was necessary to strengthen defenses to prevent the Seireitei from being unable to respond in time. Captain Yukita is right. The defense of Karakura town cannot be completely handed over to Kurosaki Makoto, Kurosaki Ichigo, Urahara Kisuke and others. It is the responsibility of the GOTY 13 to prevent the creation of the Cheng-ge. Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni said in a deep voice, expressing his attitude and opinion, setting the tone, and then spoke. But, what suggestions do you have for the captain who will go to Karakura town for short-term defense, sir? Here comes the point. Without a doubt, this sentence is the real point. Who goes to Karakura town? This is the key. However, compared to staying in the Seireitei, going to Karakura town is undoubtedly a tough job. In addition to staying in the real world like ordinary members of the 13th Division, they also need to use artificial bodies at ordinary times. Moreover, once they are really attacked by Aizen Sasuke and the Seireitei, the Shinigami stationed in Karakura town will inevitably encounter all kinds of unpredictable risks. In an instant, many captains exchanged glances with each other implicitly. Just when Komamura Sejin, who had the strongest sense of justice and responsibility, was about to be the first to step out, Yuna Hanaretsu walked out with an elegant step in the slightly surprised eyes of everyone. At this moment, many captains who were familiar with Yuna Hanaretsu's character, couldn't help but be a little confused. Yuna Hanaretsu, who has served as the captain for 1,000 years, gave most Shinigami the impression of being a real house girl in addition to being gentle and elegant and having superb medical skills. Especially in the past few decades after the sacrifice of Vice Captain Senju, Yuna Hanaretsu's usual range of activities has become increasingly smaller, and she has almost only spent her time in the captain's meeting room and the Yunahana courtyard. Chapter 577. Yuna Hanaretsu's sudden change of style, Part 3. More importantly, as the captain of the 4th Division, Yuna Hanaretsu had no need to participate in the front line of the battle. Immediately, Komamura Sejin, who didn't know much about Yuna Hanaretsu and was the most upright and righteous, was the first to speak out in opposition. Captain Yunahana, as the captain of the medical division who is not good at fighting, it is better for you to stay in the safer Seireitei. Leave the matter of going to Karakura town to guard against Aizen Sasuke and the Seireitei to me. But Komamura Sejin's righteous words made some captains look extremely strange. Captain Komamura, Yuna Hanaretsu hid his hands in his sleeves, with a gentle and warm look on his face, and then slightly opened his eyes and said, "You can't, think dog." Komamura Sejin. And Yuna Hanaretsu also realized that he had made a slip of the tongue and accidentally used the word thing dog that Senju Makoto had accidentally said in this place. Although Yuna Hanaretsu did not think that his choice of words and evaluation were wrong, it was not right to speak his mind carelessly. Then, without waiting for Komamura Sejin and the other captains to carefully ponder the meaning of the word thing dog, Yuna Hanaretsu changed his tone and said tactfully, "With Captain General Yamamoto having to continue to stay in the Seireitei, there are not many suitable captains who can sit in Karakura town and preside over the overall situation. Captain Komamura is still a little lacking in this aspect." This statement undoubtedly made Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni fall into deep thought. Aizen Sasuke's amazing strength is undoubtedly not something that ordinary captains can contend with. What is there that there are not many suitable captains? In fact, looking at the entire GOTY 13, the only candidate who can sit in Karakura town and compete with Aizen Sasuke is Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni and Yuna Hanaretsu. The only thing that made Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni slightly worried was that if Yuna Hanaretsu completely entered the fighting state, the consequences would be quite troublesome. "Captain Yunahana, are you sure?" Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni asked. "Well, this is the only way." Yuna Hanaretsu spoke with a gentle and peaceful expression. "But I have an unwelcome request." "Please say it." Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni said. "I will also take Makoto's body to Karakura town." Yuna Hanaretsu said. Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni heard this, and he breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Rather than saying that this was Yuna Hanaretsu's request, it would be better to say that Yuna Hanaretsu was expressing his attitude, and it also showed that the scabbard that could once accommodate Yuna Hanaretsu's blade was still playing a role. Okay, in this case, then many matters in Karakura town will be handed over to Captain Yunahana for full decision-making. After a pause, Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni then looked at the other captains and asked, So besides Captain Unohana, are there any other captains willing to go to Karakura? Then, the other captains hesitated. Unohana Retsu, the captain of the healing squad, took the lead in expressing his attitude, and the other captains also spoke up. In the end, after consulting Unohana Retsu, in addition to Unohana Retsu, the 4 captains, Soifong, Kakushansui, Hitsuge Ayashiro, and Zaraki Kinpachi, will lead their subordinates to directly move into Karakura to set up defenses. However, due to the difference between the real world and the Soul Society, in order to facilitate the Shinigami to move freely in the real world and ensure the recovery of their spirits, the 12th squad needs to provide corresponding artificial bodies. With the end of the captain's meeting, the entire GOTY 13th squad also fell into a busy period. In addition to the 12th squad needing to urgently provide a large number of artificial bodies, even Kurosachi Mairi had to tighten the screws himself. For the other squads that are about to move into Karakura, the captains of each squad are selecting their subordinates to follow them to the real world, and on the other hand, they need to make temporary arrangements for the team affairs in the Seireitei. After all, each squad still has different responsibilities, and it is impossible for them to completely ignore their original squad responsibilities after going to the real world. Among them, Unohana Retsu, as the commander of the next Karakura town affairs, used the reason that he needed to go to Karakura town in advance to investigate and verify the situation. After getting his special artificial body, he left the Seireitei and went to Karakura town with only Kotetsu. Karakura town. In an empty street corner, Unohana Retsu walked out with Kotetsu with a calm face. However, the throbbing in Unohana Retsu's heart is undoubtedly unknown to anyone. Before, although Senju Makoto also deliberately stayed in the Seireitei as long as possible as Kurosaki Makoto, in order to avoid suspicion, the contact between the two sides undoubtedly needs to be cautious. Now, I finally found a reason to come to Karakura town. Thinking of this, Unohana Retsu's heart unconsciously surged with joy. Makoto, will you be surprised? Suddenly, Unohana Retsu couldn't help but raise a special arc at the corner of his mouth. In order to create this little surprise, and to prevent this information from being known by Senju Makoto first, Unohana Retsu almost set off in a hurry. Then, Unohana Retsu and Kotetsu put on the special artificial body, which was convenient for restoring spiritual pressure in the artificial body, and could avoid the need for powerful Shinigami to pay attention to restraining their own spiritual pressure all the time, so as to avoid unnecessary oppression and influence on normal humans. Captain Unohana, what should we do next? Kotetsu asked, while pulling the hem of the white dress on her body a little embarrassedly. Perhaps because Kotetsu was too tall and slender, the short skirt originally prepared for the artificial body seemed a little too short, so the Kotetsu's long legs that were completely hidden in the white Shinigami suit were completely exposed. This was undoubtedly quite uncomfortable for the shy and timid yoga Kotetsu. She subconsciously pulled the hem of her skirt, trying to cover up some more skin. As for Unohana Retsu, she was dressed in a student sailor uniform. The rather close-fitting white top completely highlighted Unohana Retsu's exaggerated figure. Since we are in the real world, it is natural to say hello to Kurosaki Makoto first. Unohana Retsu said casually, just as he was about to take a step. Unohana Retsu turned his head and glanced at Yuga Kotetsu, who seemed to have become more youthful and beautiful behind him. As if he had considered something, he turned around and untied a braid in front of his chest, letting the beautiful black hair like a waterfall fall behind him. For a moment, Yuga Kotetsu felt that Unohana Retsu's style had suddenly changed, and he looked faintly younger than himself. And, Yuga Kotetsu looked at the back of Unohana Retsu walking forward and thought secretly. Why does it seem like Captain Unohana is in a good mood? Chapter 578. Do you know Kurosaki Makoto? For a moment, Unohana Retsu and Kotetsu walked in Karakura town in their casual clothes, which was nothing short of an extremely beautiful scenery. Wherever they passed, they attracted one eye after another. However, Unohana Retsu did not have the slightest intention of staying in the gazes. The pair of beautiful legs that were as white as cream outside the sailor suit walked very fast, as if they were running to something. Even Kotetsu, who was obviously much taller than Unohana Retsu, had to run a few steps from time to barely keep up with Unohana Retsu's pace. Captain, Kotetsu, who was still a little uncomfortable with the artificial body, had to run quickly, and couldn't help but shyly pull the hem of his clothes with one hand to avoid exposing some of his scenery under the gazes of the surrounding eyes. Let's go find Mr. Kurosaki Makoto. Does the captain know where Mr. Kurosaki Makoto lives? Kotetsu asked. Of course I know. Yuna Hanaretsu replied casually. Yuna Hanaretsu naturally remembered the street location of his disciple's flower shop, and before going to Karakura town, Yuna Hanaretsu had roughly memorized the map of Karakura town. Therefore, Yuna Hanaretsu's steps were almost without pause, as if she was a female high school student who had lived in Karakura town for quite some time, and she was not at all unfamiliar with the surrounding environment and roads. Soon, the Kurosaki clinic appeared in Yuna Hanaretsu's sight. However, Yuna Hanaretsu's gaze only paused at the Kurosaki clinic for a moment, and then looked in another direction, and his steps became more hurried. And, Yuna Hanaretsu felt that his heartbeat seemed to speed up inexplicably. As a teacher, would it be a bit unrestrained to take the initiative to meet Makoto? What if Makoto misunderstands that I don't want to stay in the courtyard alone, and his figure always appears in my mind uncontrollably? If Makoto's intelligence ability finds out that Yukita-Jushiro's speech at the captain's meeting was the product of my consultation and guidance with Yukita-Jushiro? Will Makoto, who was too proud, betray his teacher? Yuna Hanaretsu's footsteps suddenly stopped, and his originally happy expression changed back and forth under the gaze of Kotetsuin. Captain, what's wrong? Kotetsuin blinked in confusion and asked. Yuna Hanaretsu heard this, and his expression returned to his usual gentle and calm appearance, as if he spoke casually. Yuin, I suddenly thought of a friend of mine, and I want to hear your opinion. Yes, Captain. Kotetsuin replied. That's right, a friend of mine, yes, Captain. Kotetsuin looked at Yuna Hanaretsu in confusion, who rarely showed a hesitant look, and waited seriously for Yuna Hanaretsu's next words. Yuna Hanaretsu opened his mouth slightly several times, but he held back what he wanted to say. After all, if he restored his original identity with sincerity, wouldn't Kotetsuin know that this friend was a friend out of thin air? More importantly, it is often like knowing the answer in your heart before flipping a coin. When Yuna Hanaretsu asked the first question, she also had the answer in her heart. Sincerity is the most important, just like the flower that has been soaked in blood and mud for 1,000 years and has never bloomed. When it decides to bloom for someone, all kinds of external factors have become insignificant. Kotetsuin looked at the gentle smile on Yuna Hanaretsu's face, and this time he felt a sweet feeling from it. It was as if the sailor suit that Yuna Hanaretsu was wearing was like a high school girl who was deeply in love. At this moment, even Kotetsuin, who was also a woman, inexplicably felt a throbbing feeling. Captain Yuna Hana is so beautiful. Unfortunately, this smile only stayed in front of Kotetsuin for a moment, and Yuna Hanaretsu continued to walk forward. This made Kotetsuin slightly stunned, and couldn't help but sigh that Captain Yuna Hana had so quickly integrated into the image of a female high school student in a sailor suit. I have to work hard too. Kotetsuin shyly let go of the hand holding him at the dress, and hurriedly followed Yuna Hanaretsu. Yuna Hanaretsu's attention was no longer on Kotetsuin at this moment, and his eyes kept looking at the house numbers of the surrounding rooms. As the house numbers got closer and closer, Yuna Hanaretsu couldn't help but feel inexplicably excited. Unlike the situation where he had to pay special attention to every move in the Seireitei, before the other members of the GOTY 13 arrived at Karakura town, he could undoubtedly truly enjoy a quiet and beautiful time with Makoto. This was undoubtedly something that Yuna Hanaretsu had been thinking about for decades. Perhaps, Senju Makoto had promised to come back, but after meeting Senju Makoto many times, they could only maintain a vague relationship, similar to the state of scratching an itch through a shoe, which undoubtedly made Yuna Hanaretsu a little unbearable. Since the mountain doesn't come to me, then I will go to the mountain, Makoto. The next moment, the smile on Yuna Hanaretsu's face suddenly disappeared completely. Looking at the flower shop in front of him, which was only a ruin, the whole person was completely frozen in place. Captain Kotetsuin, who hurriedly followed, suddenly felt cold all over. Yuna Hanaretsu, who was gentle and warm just now, already exuded an aura of keeping strangers away. Kotetsuin swallowed his saliva, and his eyes followed Yuna Hanaretsu's gaze, looking at the collapsed ruins surrounded by the cordon, and there was even a piece of the plaque with the word flower shop lying at his feet. Seeing this, Kotetsuin looked at the faint black air that had begun to emanate from Yuna Hanaretsu, and said cautiously, Captain, maybe Mr. Kurosaki Makoto doesn't live here. Could it be that you made a mistake? However, this sentence undoubtedly hit a minefield. So, Yim feels that Mr. Kurosaki Makoto deceived me and gave me a fake address. Yuna Hanaretsu spoke in a calm tone without a trace of ripples. When Kotetsuya nodded subconsciously, he suddenly found that there seemed to be a chill in Hanaretsu's eyes. In an instant, Kotetsuya's head shook like an electric fan. At this moment, an old man staggered by as if taking a walk, and his eyes unconsciously glanced at Hanaretsu and Kotetsuya. Immediately, Kotetsuya hurriedly walked up to the old man as if he had found a savior and asked, "Grandpa, do you know Kurosaki Makoto?" Chapter 579. A courtyard prepared for me. The old man paused, looking at the short dress in front of him, but the hot body of Kotetsuya was barely covered. His eyes lit up, and he asked, "What Makoto did you say?" "Makoto Kurosaki." Kotetsuya repeated. "What Kurosaki?" "Makoto Kurosaki." "What Makoto Kurosaki?" Just as Kotetsuya was getting more and more anxious, Hanaretsu stood in front of Kotetsuya. The old man looked at the even more beautiful Hanaretsu in front of him, and his eyes almost glowed. However, just when the old man seemed to be completely immersed in the beautiful appearance of Hanaretsu, a sharp wooden table leg hit the old man's abdomen. The old man. Then, Hanaretsu showed a smiling expression on his face and asked back, "What Kurosaki?" The old man shuddered, and his confused expression straightened up, and he answered without hesitation, "Makoto Kurosaki." "Then what?" Hanaretsu asked calmly. The old man spoke very quickly and clearly. "About a week ago, the Kurosaki flower shop was hit by a large vehicle that lost control, so the Kurosaki flower shop has been moved." "Where did it go?" Hanaretsu asked. I don't know, the old man. "Think about it again." Hanaretsu narrowed his eyes and asked calmly. "Yes, I'm sorry, I really don't know." At this moment, the old man was almost about to cry, and he felt that the extremely beautiful high school girl in front of him was simply a demon. "Thank you for your answer," Hanaretsu said casually, and then he moved the sharp table leg that was against the old man's abdomen. The old man, who looked old and frail, just now disappeared in front of Hanaretsu and Kotetsuya with almost flying steps. Seeing this, Kotetsuya asked hesitantly, "Captain, isn't this a bad behavior towards humans? 1,000 years ago, Rukongei was very chaotic. The current Rukongei is also in a very bad state of security. The world is also not a place where everyone is kind. You are too reserved and kind." Hanaretsu casually taught Kotetsuya a lesson, and then walked back the way he came without looking back. Kotetsuya thought for a moment, and hurriedly chased after him and asked, "Captain, where are we going now?" Hanaretsu did not answer, and walked straight into the Kurosaki clinic, which was not far away. As the door of the Kurosaki clinic opened, Kurosaki Ishin, who was sitting lazily on a chair, said casually, "Welcome, is there anything wrong with you? Oh my god." When Kurosaki Ishin saw the appearance of Hanaretsu clearly in front of him, he subconsciously jumped up, and his voice was like a cassette. "Hanaretsu." Kurosaki Ishin, who almost thought he was dazzled, was completely stunned. Hanaretsu, who had already learned a lot of information from Senju Makoto, spoke expressionlessly. "I feel very uncomfortable. I hope that Dr. Kurosaki Ishin can help me solve my troubles." "No, I dare not," Kurosaki Ishin responded, and quickly took off the white coat he was wearing and threw it into the corner, and then carefully invited Hanaretsu to sit down. Although Kurosaki Ishin had no idea how Hanaretsu discovered his identity, he had to be extremely cautious and careful with Hanaretsu. After all, strictly speaking, Kurosaki Ishin's crime was much more serious than that of Rukia Kachaka. Unauthorized stripping of the power of the god of death, abandoning the responsibility of being a god of death, escaping to the world and combining with the queency, etc. Any one of these crimes is a taboo of the Gotti 13. And with the decline of the Shiba family, and even the decline of the voice of the entire aristocratic class in the Seireitei, once Kurosaki Ishin's identity is exposed, it is entirely possible that the Captain General will directly order his arrest and execution. Therefore, although he looked like a big man, Ishin Kurosaki couldn't help but burst into tears while serving tea to Hanaretsu. In his mind, Ishin Kurosaki had already seen scenes of separation from his family. "I'm sorry, Masaki, I can only ask you to raise the children from now on. I'm sorry, Ichigo, I didn't get to see you get married and have children. I'm sorry, Yako, Karin, please forgive me for not being able to watch you grow up." However, seeing this weird scene in front of him, Kotetsu felt like he was going to have a question mark in his head. "What's wrong with this uncle?" Why does he look like he wants to kneel down to the captain? However, Unohana did not directly expose Isshin Kuroseiki's identity, but turned the teacup in his hand and said it casually. As the person in charge of the next defensive work of Karakura Town, I'm here to see Mr. Kuroseiki Makoto. Does Mr. Kuroseiki Isshin know where Mr. Kuroseiki Makoto is? I know. Kuroseiki Isshin betrayed Senju Makoto's information without any hesitation. At this moment, in order to please Unohana not to report his whereabouts to the 1st Squadron, Kuroseiki Isshin behaved very actively. Then, Kuroseiki Isshin chose to close the business directly, and then personally took Unohana and Kotetsu into Senju Makoto's new residence. However, what Kuroseiki Isshin didn't know was that his attitude of betraying Senju Makoto without hesitation made Unohana look at Kuroseiki Isshin's back with a bit of unkindness. You actually chose to betray Makoto so easily. Unohana seemed to respond to Kuroseiki Isshin's flattery with a gentle expression from time to time, but in his heart he was ready to eliminate this unstable factor hiding beside Senju Makoto if there was a chance. Soon, under the guidance of the guide Kuroseiki Isshin, Unohana and Kotetsu arrived at the flower exhibition hall. Captain Unohana, Kuroseiki Makoto's new residence is in the courtyard behind that flower exhibition hall. Kuroseiki Isshin pointed his finger in the direction behind that flower exhibition hall and said in a flattering manner, "Well, I'm troubling Dr. Kuroseiki Isshin this time." Unohana replied, "No trouble, no trouble. If you need any help, Captain Unohana, just ask." After a pause, Kuroseiki Isshin rubbed his hands and said, "If there's nothing else, I'll go back to the clinic first." Unohana smiled and nodded, watching Kuroseiki Isshin leave. "Captain, who is that Kuroseiki Isshin?" Kotetsu asked. "A person who is not worth mentioning." Unohana replied casually, looking at the courtyard that was vaguely visible behind the flower exhibition hall, and couldn't help but reveal a gentle and happy smile on his face again, thinking secretly, "Garden. Did the idiot Cheng prepare it for me? If that's the case, I'll reluctantly forgive you." Chapter 580 Beach Vacation. At the same time, on the beach along the coast of Karakura Town, laughter could be heard from time to time. "Bibu, how abominable. Mr. Kuroseiki actually attacked me with a water gun secretly. Look at my counterattack. Bang. Plop. Alright, where are you aiming to splash water? You can't attack the eyes." Makoto Senju, who was wearing beach pants, pretended to be angry and said, then put on the sunglasses stuck on his head, and set the large water gun in his hand towards the clear water under his feet, and the bullet capacity was full. Makoto Senju's eyes, which were covered by sunglasses, were locked on Inoue, who was wearing an orange bikini and showing a hot body that a high school student should not have. His eyes seemed to be looking for the next target of attack on that large piece of white skin. "Alright, you have to be careful this time. Emptying the magazine will be my most basic respect for you from now on." However, before Senju Makoto could launch a counterattack against Inoue, a large amount of water suddenly splashed behind Senju Makoto. It was Nguyen who kept splashing water at Senju Makoto with an expressionless face. "Manager, you are too careless. This time, Mr. Kuroseiki will be attacked from both sides." For a while, Inoue and Nguyen sandwiched Senju Makoto in the middle, and kept splashing water on Senju Makoto in the middle. The water gun in the hand of Senju Makoto, who was attacked, naturally shot randomly, and kept blowing the horn of counterattack against Inoue and Nguyen. Countless water drops splashed up and fell again, breaking into more water drops on the fair skin of Inoue and Nguyen. However, with only one water gun in his hand, no matter how brave and invincible Senju Makoto was against two, he would inevitably lose one thing while focusing on the other. At this moment, Nell, who was wearing a one-piece swimsuit on the shore, watched this scene and felt anxious that her father was bullied. "Father, I'll help you." Then, Nell aimed directly at the direction of Senju Makoto and launched super acceleration. The whole person rushed into Senju Makoto's arms almost like a torpedo along the sea surface. When Senju Makoto, who was focusing on the continuous output, turned his head and saw that Nell had already reflected an extremely clear smiling face on the lens of Senju Makoto's sunglasses. Bang! The next moment, Nell accurately crashed into Senju Makoto's arms, and directly threw Senju Makoto into the sea. Inoue and Nguyen, who were originally counterattacked by water guns from time to time, saw this and almost did not hesitate to launch a more fierce attack on Senju Makoto, and even grabbed the water gun that Senju Makoto had lost and began to refill the ammunition. On the contrary, Nell, a little lily who used to live in Huko Mundo, how could she swim? Moreover, with Nell's short legs, even though the seawater where Makatao Senju and others were standing was not deep, Nell began to sink to the bottom with a gurgling sound. Father, father, help me. When Makatao Senju pulled Nell up, Nell, who was afraid of water, almost hugged one of Makatao Senju's arms tightly, not wanting to let go at all. The main point is that she is afraid of water, but she wants to stick with Makatao Senju all the time. However, in this way, Makatao Senju, who could barely resist, was almost defeated in this water fight with the help of Nell, the little troublemaker. Until the weakest Inuyaoraim was exhausted, the combination of Inuyaoraim and Nyuyun was exposed. Makatao Senju, who had been preparing for a long time, launched a deadly counterattack and drove Inuyaoraim and Nyuyun all the way back to the beach from the sea. When Makatao Senju and the others were so hungry from laughing and playing that they started to growl, Synopsis came over with the barbecue that had just been cooked. Manager, the barbecue is ready. Makatao Senju, who was lying on the beach wearing sunglasses, heard this and Patignaro, who had just drunk a bellyful of seawater in the sea and was lying on his chest with water flowing out of her mouth, and then spoke. Rem, barbecue is fun only when everyone grills and eats together. Since we are at the beach, let's have fun like a vacation. Compared to playing in the water, I'm more happy to be able to help the manager. Synopsis answered seriously. Makatao Senju glanced at Rem, who was also wearing a bikini that showed off her figure, and stopped persuading him. It's up to you. Then, Makatao Senju led everyone to start the next beach barbecue activity, filling their stomachs while recovering the large amount of physical strength consumed by playing. This time, due to the relocation of the flower shop, Senju Makatao suddenly realized that he seemed to have been in the world for so long, but he had never really traveled, let alone taken his employees on vacation. In addition, the appearance of Nell also made Senju Makatao think of taking all the employees to relax. However, since the threat of Aizen Sosok and Kuroyome had not been eliminated, Senju Makatao naturally could not stay away from Karakura town. Therefore, Senju Makatao chose a wild beach with beautiful scenery and sparse population on the coastal side of Karakura town, and then simply took a few days of seaside vacation. It can be regarded as a relaxation before the war. After finishing the beach barbecue, Senju Makatao lay on the beach chair, drinking freshly squeezed juice, watching the beach volleyball of Inuyaoraim and Nyumu in front of him. The arc of the ball is really good. Senju Makatao couldn't help but nod slightly to show his appreciation from the perspective of appreciating sports. However, Nell obviously didn't appreciate beach volleyball very much, but held Senju Makatao's wrist with both hands and said coquettishly, "Father, come and play with Nell. Nell is going to build a big Kainyakyu castle." Ah? Kainyakyu castle. I don't know what Kainyakyu looks like. I may not be able to help Nell. After a pause, Senju Makatao continued to look at the direction of the beach volleyball, waved his hand casually, and said perfunctorily, "Nell, you build a castle first. I will guide you in some details later. Go ahead, I will watch you." Nell looked at the sunglasses cover in her eyes, nodded, and said, "Then father, please watch me carefully." "No problem." Senju Makatao responded without turning his head, and then took another mouthful of juice, and the beach volleyball of Inuyaoraim and Nyumu was reflected in his sunglasses. At this moment, the sky was blue and the sea was blue and the sun was shining. The salty sea breeze and the humid air made Senju Makatao feel a rare sense of comfort and relaxation. Great, Senju Makatao couldn't help but sigh. But suddenly, Senju Makatao's eyes went dark, and his vision was completely blocked by something. Chapter 581 I saw it. Senju Makatao was slightly stunned, and stretched out his hand to pull down his sunglasses slightly. What completely occupied his entire field of vision was a seemingly bottomless abyss and wheat-colored skin and curves that exuded an alluring luster. Senju Makatao looked up and happened to meet the pair of eyes full of cunning and playfulness, like cat eyes. Shifu Yuan Yorishi. However, at this moment, Shifu Yuan Yorishi was wearing a three-point swimsuit that was even more exaggerated than the bikini of Inuyaoraim, and Shifu Yuan Yorishi's figure was full of charm and seductiveness. This made Senju Makatao's eyes subconsciously drift slightly to one side when they were looking at Shifu Yuan Yorishi, and his mind could not help but recall the scene in which Shifu Yuan Yorishi was naked in front of him. It was also because of this that the memories in his mind and the almost looming picture in front of him caused Senju Makatao's heart to suffer a major shock. And Shifu Yuan Yorishi seemed to notice the shyness and embarrassment of Senju Makatao, but she turned around and stepped directly onto Senju Makatao, like a wild cat, and gently stroked Senju Makatao's chest with her fingers, and said, Master, are you anxious waiting? Senju Makatao coughed a few times and replied. You're indeed a little late, the barbecue is over. There is no way, Shifen Yuan Yorishi said with a smile on his face. After all, this is the first beach vacation with the master, and I must choose the right swimsuit carefully. Hearing this, Senju Makatao couldn't help but look at Shifen Yuan Yorishi again. The little bit of fabric on Shifen Yuan Yorishi's body is not enough to make a mask, so is there any need to choose one? If I had known this, Senju Makatao would have prepared Shifen Yuan Yorishi's swimsuit before coming to the beach for vacation. However, Senju Makatao originally thought that Shifen Yuan Yorishi would maintain her black cat status and would not really participate in the vacation, but he did not expect that Shifen Yuan Yorishi was in high spirits and even went back to Kurakura town alone to pick out a swimsuit before coming back. However, seeing that Shifen Yuan Yorishi seemed to be taking over, Senju Makatao looked around and tried to change the subject. There should be a little barbecue left, I'll give it to you to fill your stomach first. Shifen Yuan Yorishi, who looked like a cat ready to steal fish at the beach, licked his lips, and even drew circles slowly on Senju Makatao's abdominal muscles, and said, No, master, I have something more delicious to try. Facing Shifen Yuan Yorishi's behavior that seemed to be teasing him, Senju Makatao raised his eyebrows slightly, realizing that he could not continue to indulge this little wild cat like this. Otherwise, this little wild cat would only become more proud and arrogant. The next moment, Shifen Yuan Yorishi felt dizzy, and the whole person was pressed on the beach by Senju Makatao. Oh, it seems that the master is also interested. Shifen Yuan Yorishi, who seemed to have been firmly controlled, showed full of interest in his eyes and suggested, Then how about we compete in the sea this time? However, as Shifen Yuan Yorishi's voice fell, Senju Makatao's palm seemed to intentionally or unintentionally touch a place behind Shifen Yuan Yorishi. Shifen Yuan Yorishi's pupil shrank, and her throat unconsciously made a soft and comfortable sound. Meow. Oh no. After returning to human form, some sensitive parts of myself are actually connected with the black cat form. However, Shifen Yuan Yorishi, who had never been treated like this by others in the past, wanted to regret it now. It was too late. In less than a few breaths, Yorishi Shifen Yuan was like a cat that was numb from being petted. She completely softened and could no longer resist. However, Makatao Senju did not intend to embarrass her cat, and let Yorishi Shifen Yuan, who was completely convinced, lie on his legs. Makatao Senju applied sunscreen to Yorishi Shifen Yuan according to her request, although Makatao Senju did not think that it was necessary to apply sunscreen for Yorishi Shifen Yuan's healthy wheat-colored skin. However, there was no reason for Makatao Senju not to satisfy Yorishi Shifen Yuan with such a simple request. However, what surprised Makatao Senju was that the feel of Yorishi Shifen Yuan's wheat-colored skin was much better than he had imagined. It was smooth and delicate, and also had a special elasticity. With the lubrication of sunscreen, Makatao Senju felt as if he was stroking the finest silk in the world. How does it feel? Shifen Yuan Yorishi's eyes were full of laziness, and then she asked casually. Very good. Senju Makatao answered subconsciously. Shifen Yuan Yorishi's face flashed with a hint of playfulness and asked. Compared with the black cat form, does the master like this form more, or the cat form more? In an instant, Senju Makatao's heart subconsciously fell into a tangle, a little combination of the two forms. When Shifen Yuan Yorishi spoke slowly, a pair of cute and furry cat ears appeared on her head, and a cat tail extended from Shifen Yuan Yorishi's back at some point, gently rubbing on Senju Makatao's palm that was applying sunscreen. At this moment, even Senju Makatao couldn't help, his pupils shrank, revealing a look of shock. Shifen Yuan Yorishi can actually maintain this special cat girl form. However, Senju Makatao's behavior of applying sunscreen to Shifen Yuan Yorishi alone also caused some dissatisfaction from Nikuka Otomu and Inryoraim who were playing beach volleyball. It's shameful to monopolize Kuroseki teacher or storm manager. Immediately, just as Shifen Yuan Yorishi was waiting for Senju Makatao's next reaction with a sly look on his face, Inryoraim and Nikuka Otomu came over, grabbed one of Senju Makatao's arms respectively, and asked in unison. Kuroseki teacher or store manager, can you please help me apply sunscreen too? Yes, Senju Makatao responded subconsciously, and then realized that something was not good. After all, he only had two hands, how could he apply sunscreen to Nikuka Otomu, Inryoraim and Shifen Yuan Yorishi at the same time? At this moment, what Senju Makatao didn't notice was that Yuna Hanaretsu and Kotetsuin were standing on a small hill behind the beach. Captain, look, Mr. Kurosaki Makatao is over there, Yuna Hanaretsu responded to Kotetsu's voice, which seemed to be devoid of any emotion. I saw it. Chapter 582 The Helpful Side. From Seireitei to Kurakuracho, they searched the Hara flower shop and the flower exhibition hall in vain. In the empty courtyard, Yuna Hanaretsu waited quietly for a long time until he accidentally saw Shibuya Yorishi, who was wearing an extremely revealing bikini and heading in a certain direction. In contrast, the anxious Shibuya Yorishi did not notice Yuna Hanaretsu, who entered the artificial corpse without leaking any spiritual pressure. Then, Yuna Hanaretsu, who had some guesses in his mind, followed the trail left by the wild cat that exuded the smell of spring estrus and found the location of this wild beach. From a distance, only the outline of Senju Makatao could be vaguely distinguished. However, Senju Makatao was surrounded by Inuyori, Nirvana Otono, and Shibuya Yorishi, and it was very clear that his hands seemed to be a little too busy. And Kotetsu Yuin, who had been wandering around for a long time, did not notice the change in Yuna Hanaretsu's tone, and just said happily, "Great. Well, it's better than I thought." Yuna Hanaretsu followed up with a sentence, which made Kotetsu Yuin shiver all over, and couldn't help looking at Yuna Hanaretsu in some confusion. "Yuin?" "Yes." Kotetsu Yuin quickly responded. "You go back to the center of Kurakura town first, and meet up with the other Shinigami who will arrive later." Yuna Hanaretsu said in an imperative tone. "Then, where is the captain?" Kotetsu Yuin had this question in his mind, but feeling the terrifying aura that Yuna Hanaretsu was gradually emitting, he didn't dare to say a word, and could only quickly return to the center of the city according to what Yuna Hanaretsu said. Watching Kotetsu Yuin's back completely disappear from his sight, Yuna Hanaretsu's face completely faded, the last trace of expression used to cover himself. In the slightly lowered eyes, there was an extreme calmness and murderous intent. Then, Yuna Hanaretsu raised his foot and walked towards Senju Makatao's position, and as the distance got closer, Senju Makatao's reluctant voice, as well as the laughter of Inuyori, Nirvana and Shibuya Yorishi, became clearer and clearer. However, although Senju Makatao kept saying trouble, the smile on his face was inevitably a little strong. After all, no matter what, the combination of Inuyori, Shibuya Yorishi and Nirvana's different styles is undoubtedly a rare and beautiful scenery. Even if it is just out of pure appreciation, this is a scene that no one can refuse. It's just, applying sunscreen to 3 people at the same time, it's really a bit too busy, and when Senju Makatao is applying Shibuya Yorishi's thigh with one hand and applying Inuyori's smooth back with the other hand, an inexplicable chill sprouted in his heart. Feeling something in his heart, he instinctively turned his head to look behind him. Yuna Hanaretsu, who was wearing a sailor suit and had long hair like a waterfall falling behind her, appeared in Senju Makatao's eyes. Senju Makatao. Almost subconsciously, Senju Makatao suddenly pulled his hands back from Inuyori and Shibuya Yorishi, and stood up suddenly, his voice stuttering. "Old, Yuna-hana, Captain Yuna-hana, why didn't you tell me you were coming? Tell me in advance so that I couldn't go to greet you." At this moment, Yuna Hanaretsu's smile was full of tenderness and warmth. "Mr. Kurosaki Makatao is so busy, how can I have the nerve to trouble Mr. Kurosaki Makatao? And if it weren't for this, how could I see Mr. Kurosaki Makatao like this?" When he said this, Yuna Hanaretsu's voice paused, and his eyes swept over Inuyori, Shibuya Yorishi and Nirvana respectively, and then continued. The helpful side. Instantly, Senju Makatao felt that his nerves were tensed up a lot. He could hear the strong murderous intent from these gentle and warm words that seemed to praise his good character. At this moment, Senju Makatao admitted that he was indeed panicked. It was almost as panicky as when he first met Aizen Sosok. He felt panic in his heart that was almost uncontrollable. While forcibly controlling his expression, eyes and breathing to remain calm, Senju Makatao took the initiative to face Yuna Hanaretsu, isolating Yuna Hanaretsu's gaze from the others. At this moment, in addition to worrying about his own situation, Senju Makatao was undoubtedly more worried that Yuna Hanaretsu would slice the others first in a moment of impulse. Then, Senju Makatao tried to explain indirectly. "Captain Yuna-hana, you are too kind. My love is not that overflowing." A gentle sea breeze blew by, messing up Yuna Hanaretsu's hair a little, covering Yuna Hanaretsu's eyes, making those gentle eyes seem a little more terrifying. "Really? But Mr. Kurosaki Makatao is in a good mood." With the threat at hand, he took so many people to the beach. After a pause, Yuna Hanaretsu raised his hand and touched Senju Makatao's chest, who was leaning over, and said meaningfully, and Mr. Kurosaki Makoto didn't invite me to play with him. I feel a little sad and frustrated by being so distant. In an instant, Senju Makoto, who understood the hidden meaning from this series of words, couldn't help but look a little bitter. However, before Senju Makoto could speak to calm Unohana, who was already on the verge of going berserk, Shifunuan Orishi, who was unaware of it, hugged Senju Makoto from the back, and really stuck close to him, and spoke to Unohana with a bright expression. Captain Unohana, I'm really sorry for not inviting you, but after all, it's my master who's taking us out for a trip. I'm afraid you'll feel a little uncomfortable as an outsider. Master. Outsider. As these two words reached Unohana's ears, Unohana's expression was visibly broken. Wait. Senju Makoto widened his eyes, and was almost caught off guard by Shifunuan Orishi. Damn it, was Shifunuan Orishi bribed by Aizen Sosek? Or is there something wrong with his mind? Are you afraid that we won't die on the same day of the same month of the same year today? This is not just adding fuel to the fire, it's like setting fire to a gas station. Senju Makoto quickly pulled Shifunuan Orishi, who was lying on his back without any scruples, down and scolded. Yoichi, stop it, I'm talking to Captain Unohana about serious matters. However, perhaps Unohana's remaining sanity could still allow him to tolerate Senju Makoto to a certain extent, but this sanity undoubtedly did not include Shifunuan Orishi, this wild cat who dared to steal fish in front of his master in broad daylight. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 583. Let's end it here. Unprecedented surging killing intent was surging wildly under Unohana's eyes, which seemed to be calm. At this moment, Senju Makoto, who was facing away from everyone, made a mouth shape. Calm down, Unohana teacher. This also became the last bit of strength that barely maintained Unohana's rationality, and he realized that something was not right. He was able to find this position, no doubt because of Shifunuan Orishi's guidance. Moreover, Shifunuan Orishi's every move seemed to be deliberately provoking him. Could it be? Unohana tried his best to maintain a normal expression and said with a smile. It just so happens that I came to Kurakura town from Seireitei this time because I have something important to discuss with Mr. Kurosaki Makoto. Let's go to the side. However, before Unohana could finish speaking, Shifunuan Orishi actually stretched out her pink little tongue like a cat in front of Unohana's face, gently licked Senju Makoto's arm, and said coquettishly, Master, can't you take me with you? I might be able to help. Suddenly, Unohana's breathing stopped for a moment. Such a dirty and shameless wildcat. I must kill her. At this moment, this thought swept Unohana's mind almost madly, almost completely breaking the last string of reason in Unohana. However, Shifunuan Orishi's excessive behavior not only further aroused Unohana's vigilance, but even Senju Makoto, who was in the middle of the situation, realized that something was wrong. Orishi, did you do this on purpose? Senju Makoto frowned slightly, but on the surface, he only showed the right amount of distress. Orishi, stop it. If you continue like this, it will be too rude in front of Captain Unohana. Well then, Shifunuan Orishi showed a helpless expression, looking at Unohana. Unohana still looked like a beautiful flower, and did not show any obvious loss of composure. However, what Shifunuan Orishi didn't know was that Unohana had already made a decision in his heart, which was, we must not allow this dirty and shameless wildcat to stay with Makoto, otherwise this wildcat will definitely teach Makoto bad things. Suddenly, Unohana even regretted asking Shifunuan Orishi to teach Senju Makoto the flash step in person, so that Shifunuan Orishi had the opportunity to contact Senju Makoto openly. Just when Senju Makoto was about to take Unohana, who was on the verge of exploding all the time, away from here, and try to explain and appease him, and prove his innocence by the way, a crisp and sweet voice instantly calmed the atmosphere. Father. Where are you going? Take Nell with you. The next moment, Nell, who was still building a castle not far away, thought that Senju Makoto was going somewhere, and hurriedly ran towards Senju Makoto and hugged Senju Makoto's calf. It's over. For a moment, there was no trace of warmth in Senju Makoto's mind. He only felt a strong chill like a storm erupting from Unohana in front of him. Yuna Hanaretsu looked at Nell, and his expression was completely out of control, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide open, especially Nell's green hair, which was particularly eye-catching in Yuna Hanaretsu's eyes. "Makao, I didn't expect your daughter to be so big, good. Very good. Very good." Yuna Hanaretsu said word by word. In extreme anger, no. Senju Makao actually had a daughter behind her back, and she was not the offspring of her own birth. Yuna Hanaretsu's reason completely collapsed. Subconsciously, he no longer called Senju Makao Mr. Kurosaki Makao with a certain distance, but instinctively called out the most accustomed name for Senju Makao. And whether there was any guidance and temptation from Shifen Yuan Yorishi has become insignificant. In such a world, what is the meaning of existence? Only the thorough washing of blood. Yuna Hanaretsu's artificial body instantly detached, and he returned to the state of a spirit wearing the captain's aori. "Everyone, let's end it here today." The blood-colored spiritual pressure instantly erupted, dyeing the beautiful beach under the blue sky and white clouds into a blood-colored hell. "Calm down, Captain Yuna Hana." Realizing that the situation was extremely bad, Senju Makao tried to make a final rescue. However, Yuna Hanaretsu did not react at all. The moment the zanpakutō in his hand was unsheathed, a large amount of sticky blood also flowed out crazily. "Makao, hehe, so that's how it is. Calling me Captain Yuna Hana all the time is also a hint of intentionally distancing yourself from me? It doesn't matter. It seems that I need to let you recall something important." Yuna Hanaretsu's head was slightly raised, and that beautiful appearance now exuded a temperament like a demon, which made everyone present except Senju Makao shiver. More importantly, the thick blood flowing from the zanpakutō in Yuna Hanaretsu's hand had already completely covered the entire beach. Bankai. All annihilation. Along with that voice that seemed to be devoid of any emotion, this blood-colored space that seemed to be made entirely of blood completely surrounded Yuna Hanaretsu, Senju Makao, Shiuen Yorishi and others. "It's over, this time Yuna Hana teacher is really serious." Just as this thought emerged in Senju Makao's mind, a blood-colored slash suddenly came towards Nell, who was holding Senju Makao. Senju Makao, who knew that Yuna Hanaretsu would never show mercy in this state, dodged the blood-colored slash, stretched out his hand and lifted Nell into his hand, and spoke. "Yuna Hana-sensei, calm down, Nell." Before Senju Makao could finish, Yuna Hanaretsu, who had completely entered a rampage state and had reached his bankai, came up to him almost instantly, staring at Senju Makao with eyes like an evil ghost. The Kaijin in his hand included both Senju Makao and Nell as targets for killing. "Makao, tell me who gave birth to this little hollow with you." At this moment, facing the long-lost sense of oppression from Yuna Hanaretsu and the pure and strong killing intent, even Senju Makao felt his hair stand on end. The next moment, in the blink of an eye, the zanpakutō Sinrawangsai bang formed in the spirit state and Senju Makao collided with Kaijin. Bang! Yuna Hanaretsu, who seemed to be in good health, swung his full strength to slash, which was not just pure skill, but also a perfect fusion of strength, spiritual pressure, skill and fighting instinct. The moment the two zanpakutō collided, the ground that had almost turned into a large piece of blood plasma was stirred up with large ripples. P.S. There will be a third update today, but it will be a little later. Chapter 584 The person loved by Yuna Hana. The next moment, the all things and the all things seemed to have turned into large after-images, colliding wildly. A series of clashes echoed in the all things space. It was only then that Inoue, Yunmu, and Synopsis barely recovered from the sudden rampage of Yuna Hanaretsu. More importantly, the seemingly gentle and elegant captain of the healing squad was actually so terrifying. The pressure from the extremely thick blood-colored spiritual pressure was even far greater than that of Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni in his initial release state. Even Synopsis, who was actually the highest-ranking Great Huto Mundo Huto Stalk, felt a chill in his heart at this moment. But, why? Inoue looked at the scene in front of her, her body instinctively trembling under the spiritual pressure emitted by Yuna Hanaretsu, and she spoke with gritted teeth. Why did Captain Yuna Hana suddenly attack Mr. Kurosaki? But the next moment, Yorishi Shoin put her arm on Inoue shoulder and said with some gritted teeth. Because, this guy has another name. Another name? Inoue was slightly stunned and asked. Yorishi Shoin's eyes reflected the figure who was fighting against Yuna Hanaretsu with only swordsmanship, and her tone was full of affirmation. The name, Orihime, you should have heard of it too, the name that was praised as the hero of the Seireitei, Senju Makao. Senju Makao. As soon as these words came out, except for Synopsis' expression that did not change, the expressions of Seireitei and Nakanmu were all shocked. Not to mention Nakanmu, who had an unforgettable bond with Senju Cheng. Even if Seireitei stayed in Seireitei for a while, she had heard this name that left a deep mark in Seireitei from others many times. How is it possible? Master Senju died in the Expeditionary Force incident decades ago. Niuying's eyes flashed with intense emotional fluctuations, and he said, "I once believed this fact," Yorishi said slowly. "Until some time ago, I realized a rather shocking fact. Captain Unohana attaches great importance to Kurosaki Makoto. You may not know what kind of existence Captain Unohana is, but for Captain Unohana, she may look gentle and warm, but in her heart, most creatures may be just boring and unpleasant. About 100 years ago, there were captains who were killed by Captain Unohana at will, and they were killed without any guilt or sadness. Since then, I have been very clear about a fact, that is, Captain Unohana has never really regarded other Shinigami as his own kind. The only exception is Senju Makoto, the disciple cherished by Captain Unohana." At this point, Yorishi couldn't help but reveal a little fear of being killed, and then suppressed it and continued. "There is no such thing as an excessive coincidence in the world. I don't believe that Kurosaki Makoto, a mere quincy, will become another exception treated specially by Captain Unohana. And now, the facts before my eyes tell me, Kurosaki Makoto is Senju Makoto." Just after coming to this conclusion, Yorishi's face changed a lot. Originally, in Yorishi's mind, Senju Makoto and Kachikabukai were in a very similar position. They were both very interesting juniors. It was definitely a great pleasure to tease them occasionally to relieve their fatigue in the dead and dull Seireitei. Later, Yorishi noticed that Seireitei had a strange feeling towards Senju Makoto, and she deliberately planned to bring them together. After the hollowification incident, Yorishi's impression of Senju Makoto changed again, and she truly regarded him as a trusted and important friend like Urahara Kisuke. Therefore, after hearing the news of Senju Makoto's sacrifice, Yorishi was sad and wiped tears, and even secretly returned to the Seireitei to see Senju Makoto's remains several times. However, what Yorishi didn't expect was, for a moment, every bit of her time with Kurosaki Makoto in recent years emerged in Yorishi's mind, and her face turned red and blue. This feeling is like a little wild cat feeling that it has found a prey worth spending the rest of its life with, but it didn't expect that the other party was a skilled hunter in disguise from beginning to end. And she was not only thoroughly understood by the other party in the past few years, but also completely adapted to and even relied on the feeling of staying with the other party. Thinking of this, Yorishi asked loudly to Unohana and Senju Makoto who were fighting not far away. "So, am I right? Unohana Captain, Makoto-kun?" After another fierce clash between Senlong Xiang and Jin, Senju Makoto took advantage of the situation and stepped back, saying, "Yoichi, what's the point of saying this now?" That's right, the Kaijin and Unohana hands seemed to be completely covered with a layer of thick blood. He looked at Yorishi's female eyes as if he was looking at a group of corpses, and said without a trace of emotion, "Makoto, my patience has reached its limit. I will kill all these people now. You must understand, right?" At the end of his words, Unohana mouth curled up, and a dark sword came out of the sleeve of his other hand and was held tightly by Unohana. The entertainment should almost end here. Senju Makoto opened his mouth slightly, but still swallowed back what he wanted to say. Unohana in this state could never be stopped by pure words. Even if Senju Makoto's explanation could make Unohana give up his killing intention, the instinct for fighting had begun to take over the upper hand of reason. Yorishi, Inoue and Nikonmu would definitely become Unohana prey. You should know that apart from treating himself, no matter what Makoto Senju knows or is recorded in the history of Soul Society, there is no record of Unohana showing mercy. Otherwise, Makoto Senju would not have been regarded as a special scabbard that could restrain Unohana by a Manmoto Janraisai Shichikuni. Yoichi, it turned out that you deliberately led Unohana teacher here, right? Makoto Senju turned his head and glanced at Yorishi, and said unhappily. Then, without waiting for Yorishi to speak, Makoto Senju put Nell, who had been holding him in one hand and felt the murderous intent from the godmother for a long time, and was already scared and fainted, into Yorishi's hands and said, "Take good care of Nell, I will settle accounts with you later." Yorishi's expression changed slightly, and said, "Hey, Makoto, can you do it alone? Do you need my help?" There is no need. At this moment, Makoto Senju's eyes became completely serious and said, "You don't think that the person Unohana-sensei loves is weaker than her, do you?" Chapter 585 Happy Moments. At this point, after seeing Unohana Retsu's reaction, Senju Makoto, who knew that his identity had been completely exposed, had no intention of continuing to hide it. The Shinigami in his hand completely transformed from the spirit state into a physical zanpakutō, and even Senju Makoto's appearance slightly changed, completely returning to its original appearance. This scene made Inuyori time, Neo and Snop's faces full of surprise. However, at this moment, Senju Makoto obviously did not have time to explain. Unohana Retsu was definitely not joking. If he lost the battle, the rest of the people would most likely be killed by Unohana Retsu in this state. So, as Senju Makoto took a step forward, large patches of green grass spread out crazily, covering the ground that seemed to be made entirely of blood plasma. In less than a few breaths, the green grass turned into giant trees and continued to grow, making the interior of this immense space that seemed to be made entirely of blood seem to be completely filled with forests. This scene seemed like reincarnation, causing some wrinkles in Unohana Retsu's eyes, which had no fluctuations except for the killing intent. In a trance, Unohana Retsu looked at Senju Makoto, who walked not far in front of him with his zanpakutō in his hand. It seemed that time had returned to 100 years ago in the blink of an eye. The boy in the past, as if time had not left any traces on him, was just like before. Back, Makoto. Unohana Retsu said softly. "I've always been here, Unohana teacher." Senju Makoto stood about 10 steps away from Unohana Retsu, looking at Unohana Retsu in front of him with gentle eyes, and said, "It's just that I've kept Unohana teacher waiting for a long time. This battle that has been interrupted for 100 years has finally entered its final chapter." Then, Senju Makoto took the most basic kendo stance, which was also that first kendo stance that Unohana Retsu taught him, and spoke. "However, this time I am no longer the disciple who had no ability to resist you." "Oh?" Unohana Retsu's face was no longer gentle and elegant, but mixed with a calm and happy feeling. "Makoto, so you are ready to use your life to let me enjoy the long-awaited supreme pleasure?" Senju Makoto slowly pulled a smile at the corner of his mouth and answered. "It will be an extreme pleasure far beyond your imagination. It will reach the depths of the soul of my most beloved teacher Unohana Retsu, and then leave a permanent mark in Unohana Retsu's soul." "Really?" Unohana Retsu's mouth also grinned in anticipation and said, "Makoto, then please make me completely happy, please satisfy me completely. If you can, then you can enjoy other pleasures behind my back, and it's not impossible to tolerate a little. Teacher, then be careful not to be completely filled with pleasure." Almost as soon as Senju Makoto finished speaking, facing Unohana Yarai, who had completely entered a state of fighting and became the one feared by countless people in Soul Society 1,000 years ago, Senju Makoto took the initiative to meet him. "Swing the sword." Sizzle. Jin raised his sword to block Senbon Bancho, stirring up a large amount of sparks. In the eyes of Unohana Retsu with a bit of disbelief, Jin was severely overwhelmed, and Senbon Bancho's blade chopped on Unohana Retsu's shoulder without a trace of mercy. Puff. The hot blood splashed, and in the endless space, it seemed to quickly rise into a blood mist. The pain from the body did not make Unohana Retsu retreat, but completely aroused Unohana Retsu's instinct to pursue pleasure in this state. "That's it, Cheng." As Unohana Retsu responded, the dark sword that seemed to be silent, under the splashing blood, almost instinctively slashed back at Senju Cheng. In the countless training sparring in the past, Senju Cheng's body almost subconsciously slightly turned sideways to avoid the slash of the dark sword, and pulled out the all-seeing from Unohana Retsu's shoulder, and turned around to slash at Unohana Retsu from another blind spot. But in this lightning moment, when the all-seeing was slashed at Unohana Retsu's original position, Unohana Retsu seemed to have expected it and floated off the ground, and a pair of crystal jade feet just stepped on the blade at the all-seeing. At this moment, the captain, Unohana Retsu, with her long sleeves fluttering in her feathered robe, looked like a goddess or an evil ghost. The all-consuming and dark swords were simultaneously slashing down at Senju Makoto from different angles. There was no way to avoid it. Unless Senju Makoto abandoned his sword and retreated, it would be meaningless for Senju Makoto to retreat when Unohana Retsu stepped on the blade and slashed. It was just a duel between swordsmen, so what was the difference between abandoning the sword and surrendering? In this instant, Senju Makoto's instincts reacted before his thoughts. A spirit sword formed in Senju Makoto's other hand, and he blocked it upwards. Dang! After a brief stalemate, Senju Cheng and Yuna Hanaretsu pulled away from each other at the same time. The second sword? Yuna Hanaretsu tilted his head slightly, his expression showing a little surprise. After all, in Yuna Hanaretsu's impression, Senju Cheng had always been a one-sword style. Isn't this what Yuna Hana teacher taught me? Senju Cheng asked back. When you are fully in the fighting state, your other hand is empty and doing nothing. It doesn't look like you are enjoying the battle at all. Good answer, then let's really start to enjoy this wonderful moment of joy, Cheng. Yuna Hanaretsu leaned forward, and the whole person seemed to be completely excited. While quickly approaching Senju Cheng, the wound on his shoulder had been completely repaired. Under the tattered death suit, the white skin was exposed. The all-encompassing space formed by Bankai and all-encompassing is the most perfect fighting place. In addition to restricting the enemy from escaping from the all-encompassing space. Being in this space, the all-encompassing space will constantly stimulate the fighting instinct and greatly enhance the activity of the spirit itself, allowing the spirit to surpass the limit and exert a more powerful combat power. This ability is undoubtedly a chicken reap among chicken reaps for the death gods who rely on the abilities of Kidman zanpakutō, such as Hitsuge Ishiro, Izaneo, and Kurosachi Mayuri. However, only Senju Cheng knows how terrifying Yuna Hanaretsu will be in this state. The monster called the killing instinct is the embodiment of Kendo. Valkyrie is not enough to describe her figure, and the number of 8,000 styles is also difficult to summarize the Kendo style she has mastered. Chapter 586. Things beyond instinct. And being in this closed-off space, there is nowhere to escape, and the only way is death, and the terrifying Kido ability of Yuna Hanaretsu, under the powerful activity given to the spirit by the space, can almost recover all kinds of unimaginable injuries in the blink of an eye. Without Yuna Hanaretsu's permission, death is also a luxury. Only fighting, only confrontation, only fighting. At this moment, facing the strongest swordsman in the history of Soul Society, Senju Cheng did not continue to use the three-sword style that could be called a joke, nor did he deliberately hide the traces of Kendo on his body, but went all out to fight Yuna Hanaretsu with Kendo. For a while, Senju Cheng and Yuna Hanaretsu seemed to be replicas of each other, with zanpakutō and zanpakutō slashing against each other, and the collision of the dark sword and the spirit sword. The only difference is the instinct of both sides. In those few breaths, there may be hundreds of slashes and collisions, and the battle between the two sides is undoubtedly more of an instinctive confrontation. Yuna Hanaretsu's beautiful figure and the blood splashed from the wounds on her body made Yuna Hanaretsu look like she was bathed in blood from a distance. The pure white captain's feather ornament had already turned bloody. In contrast, Senju Cheng's ultimate spirit body may have a defense far beyond that of a normal god of death, but it still cannot stop the full-strength slash of Yuna Hanaretsu, who is truly at the top of the god of death. Although Senju Cheng himself has an ability that is no less than super speed regeneration, the wounds left on his body are no less than Yuna Hanaretsu. The battle between Senju Cheng and Yuna Hanaretsu has also completely entered a white-hot stage. Driven by instinct, they continue to fight and choke to the extreme. Injuries are undoubtedly meaningless to Senju Cheng and Yuna Hanaretsu. In addition to the fighting instinct, Kendo level, and spiritual pressure spirit body, the more important thing for the two sides is will. In the midst of the fight, the weak will be cowardly, afraid, and will retreat. Senju Cheng and Malzahn felt joy unconsciously, which came from the joy of releasing and satisfying their instincts. No need to think, no need to worry, no need to hesitate, that is blank, that is real. Only instincts will not lie. Instinctive contact is the closeness of the heart. The collision of the blades is also a true confession that is more real than words. After an unknown amount of time, there was another collision. This time, when the four swords collided, the dark sword and the spirit sword were almost broken off at the same time, but Jijin and Senju Cheng chopped off each other's other swords and sank into each other's chests. Puff. Blood flowed out of Senju Cheng and Malzahn mouths at the same time. The eyes of Senju Cheng and Yuna Hanaretsu slowly met. When the two sides were connected in this special and bloody way, they were so close that they could clearly feel the warmth of each other's breath. The instinctive madness in the eyes of both sides slowly faded away at the same time, and then Senju Cheng and Yuna Hanaretsu seemed to think of something at the same time, and their eyes wandered in the same direction. At this moment, through the blade that was immersed in the other's chest, Senju Cheng and Yuna Hanaretsu could clearly feel the other's heart beating violently, and it was far beyond the normal frequency, and it seemed to be getting faster and faster. More importantly, The last knife was driven by instinct. Both Unohana and Senju Cheng originally subconsciously aimed at the heart of the other, but in the end they forcibly stopped their instincts with their will, so that neither of them pierced the heart with this knife. This shows that in the minds of both parties, the importance of the other party has far exceeded the level of instinct. Especially for Unohana, who once pursued the satisfaction and pleasure of the killing instinct, which was almost the meaning of life, this reaction was tantamount to the most sincere confession in the world. As for Unohana, it was the same. After deliberately guiding Senju Cheng's strong killing instinct hidden deep in his heart, which was no less than his own, Senju Cheng finally controlled the instinct. This move made Unohana's doubts and hesitations, which were deeply hidden in his heart, slowly dissipate like dust. It turns out that Ayama or Unohana teachers think beyond instinct. The same idea sprouted in the minds of Senju and Unohana at the same time, making the heartbeats of both sides more rapid, and even faintly seem to be tending to the same frequency. Then, Senju thought of something and spoke. "Teacher, you should have had the energy to dodge, right? Why didn't you? It's too dangerous. Even if it was you, your heart would be completely destroyed." That would be, however, before Senju could finish his words, his mouth was blocked. Instantly, Senju eyes opened to an unprecedented degree. The strange feeling of being awkward, clumsy, soft and warm, and mixed with the unique sweetness of blood, made Senju brain, which was actually his first kiss in more than 100 years, go blank for a moment. He couldn't think. On the contrary, this stimulated another instinct of Senju besides fighting, and he subconsciously responded to Unohana. This made Unohana, who instinctively made this move after accumulating emotions for hundreds of years, flash with a deep panic in his eyes, and his beautiful cheeks quickly turned red. So, this feeling is so wonderful. As the two people who have the highest understanding of the structure of spirits in soul society, Unohana and Senju had almost the same thoughts at the same time. Simple contract, unimaginable wonderful experience. When Senju and Unohana reacted and separated unconsciously, a ray of crystal light slowly pulled away from the corners of their mouths, and then their eyes moved away from each other, and then they lowered their heads at the same time. The atmosphere seemed to be trapped in an indescribable wonder. Obviously, Unohana and Senju did not speak, but the heartbeat frequency transmitted to each other through the blade seemed to say a lot. This made Senju and Unohana, who were used to disguising their inner thoughts with various micro-expressions almost all the time, feel a stronger stimulation than being honest with each other. After a moment, as if to break a certain silence, and as if to regain the initiative as a teacher, Unohana opened his mouth to answer. There's no need to avoid it. If you avoid it, how can you get the answer that someone might never ask for in their lifetime? Chapter 587 The Feeling of Being Nurtured. This sentence also made Senju speechless. Perhaps, both Unohana and Senju deeply understand the importance of each other, but importance is undoubtedly divided into many kinds. In the heart of the other party, what kind of importance do you have? It is precisely because of this that both Senju and Unohana subconsciously try to maintain the existing feelings, and carefully test each other from time to time, for fear that some excessive rashness will make the relationship between the two parties go to another irreversible point. And this time, Unohana completely ran away, and even took the initiative to speak out. Nilu's stimulation is undoubtedly a very important driving force. Now, the heart that seems to be beating violently at the same frequency has undoubtedly told the other party some answers. Teacher, my answer has not changed from beginning to end. Senju responded gently. Unohana thought of something, raised his eyes, and said, "So, when you first met me, you had some bad thoughts in your heart." In an instant, Senju was speechless. He felt guilty and had no way to refute. After all, Senju really couldn't resist Unohana charm from the beginning. Unohana had undoubtedly known the answer from Senju expression. He slightly curved his mouth and said unhappily, "So that's how it is. Makoto is really a filial disciple. He actually has such bad thoughts all the time. He is really a wicked person who betrays his teacher and destroys his ancestors." Senju, who was a little embarrassed by Unohana repeated teasing, raised his eyebrows and fought back. "Unohana teacher, don't forget who is the one who wants to cultivate disciples. It is to get pleasure from disciples that can fill themselves. Isn't the idea of cultivating people who satisfy themselves also quite bad? Hanaretsu, whose thoughts were exposed, tried to maintain a gentle and elegant expression, but his face, neck and ears looked a little more rosy. However, Hanaretsu's movements were too large, which inevitably slightly affected the wound on his chest. Hanaretsu felt a sharp pain due to his distracted attention, and almost subconsciously groaned. Senju Cheng heard this, and felt his heart flutter. He quickly put his arm around Hanaretsu's waist and said, "Hana teacher, bear with it for a while." Then, Senju Cheng moved his mind, and the 10,000 things dispersed into the spirit state again and dispersed quickly, preventing Hanaretsu's wound from causing secondary pain. Under the effect of the all-ending space and Hanaretsu's return to the dojo, in just a moment, the penetrating wound on Hanaretsu's chest was completely healed. Instead, the whiteness of the wound after recovery revealed in Senju Cheng's eyes made Senju Cheng feel inexplicably hot in his heart. Senju Cheng's fiery gaze, which was no longer as deliberately concealed as in the past, also made Hanaretsu feel a little shy in his heart, and his palms subconsciously covered his chest. Ahem, Senju Cheng, who had almost no resistance to Hanaretsu, finally reacted and coughed a few times to ease the embarrassment, and his eyes also tried to move away from Hanaretsu's chest. However, Hanaretsu was covered in blood, but the death suit was tightly attached to Hanaretsu's body. With his eyes slightly shifted to the center of his chest, the perfect and exaggerated arc and the action of Hanaretsu's palm that was trying to cover up the truth almost made Senju Cheng lose his mind. But the next moment, Senju Cheng suddenly thought of something and asked subconsciously, Hana teacher, where is the scar on your chest?" Hanaretsu rolled his eyes at Senju Cheng, and said as he pulled out all the blood from Senju Cheng's chest with the most gentle movements. "With a stupid disciple like you, is there any need to keep that scar?" After a pause, Hanaretsu added as if he was afraid that Senju Cheng would misunderstand. "Originally, that scar was just a reminder that there was still an unfinished fight waiting for me that I could enjoy, but now only fighting with you can truly satisfy me. In contrast, fighting with a beast with a rough sword is undoubtedly boring and uninteresting." As soon as these words came out, Senju Cheng couldn't help but feel that he was being cultivated again. Unable to find someone who could truly satisfy his desire to fight, Hanaretsu chose to embark on the road of cultivation after discovering Senju Cheng, who also had a very high talent for the way of return and fighting instinct. However, Senju Cheng looked at Hanaretsu, who was always so gentle and elegant, and explained it with a little clumsiness for the first time, but the joy in his heart was almost impossible to conceal. "Teacher," suddenly, Senju Cheng hugged Hanaretsu's waist and said gently, "In fact, sometimes it's okay to express your inner thoughts a little more directly, such as saying directly, compared with my most important disciple, everything else is insignificant." Hanaretsu bit her lip slightly when she heard this, as if she was not used to Senju Cheng's intimate behavior. She subconsciously wanted to push Senju Cheng away, but the palm seemed so soft and weak. "Cheng, I don't think so. Don't be too proud." But, Senju Cheng couldn't help but rub Hanaretsu at his cheek and said, "That's what I think. Compared with my Hana teacher, everything else seems too insignificant. Hana teacher, since we have come to the world this time, let's not separate anymore, how about it? At the time, even if we have to return to the Seireitei, we will return to the Seireitei together openly." After these words came out, Hanaretsu's action of subconsciously trying to push Senju Cheng away paused, and her beautiful and gentle eyes seemed to be blurred. Okay, after a long time, Hanaretsu made an extremely weak sound. Instantly, a happy and satisfied smile appeared on Senju Cheng's face, but the next moment, with Hanaretsu's sinister voice, the smile on Senju Cheng's face suddenly froze. "Wait, Cheng, you still have a very important thing to answer me. Which hollow actually gave birth to your child? I haven't thanked the other party properly, so that I don't have to endure the pain of pregnancy and have a daughter. However, before Senju Cheng could speak, Hanaretsu seemed to have thought of something, and gently stroked Senju Cheng's face with his palm, and said, "Let me think, is it the Aransa named Arable who fought with you in Karakura town and you implicitly showed mercy?" Chapter 588. Rude disciple. Suddenly, Senju Cheng felt his scalp tingling. His communication with Harabal's Kurosaki Cheng was almost limited to a few flawless conversations and some subtle eye contact. Under such circumstances, Hanaretsu was able to detect those slight abnormalities. "What kind of observation is this? I can only say that he is worthy at being the only person in the original trajectory who can see through the mirror flower and water moon by observation alone. However, Senju Makoto's surface was aggrieved, and he explained. Nailu is my adopted daughter, and she has no blood relationship with me. Yuna Hanaretsu was slightly startled, and a little embarrassment appeared in his eyes. He realized that he was completely confused because of his concern, and said, I shouldn't have scared Nailu just now. Will I leave a very bad impression on Nailu? Senju Makoto's mouth corners slightly tilted, and he said helplessly. I don't know if she was broken or not, but she just fainted. After a pause, Senju Makoto continued. But fortunately, I stopped her in time, otherwise Nell would have been cut into 18 pieces. Yuna Hanaretsu. Sorry, Yuna Hanaretsu moved his mouth and tried to explain. As a Shinigami, I only attacked subconsciously when I found the Seireitei. I just didn't expect that she was Makoto's goddaughter. Seeing this, Senju Makoto naturally didn't continue to poke Yuna Hanaretsu's self-esteem and face as a teacher. On the contrary, Senju Makoto saw that Yuna Hanaretsu's attention was completely attracted by Nell, and he was secretly happy in his heart. Senju Makoto was not afraid that Yuna Hanaretsu was obsessed with Nell's problem, as Yuna Hanaretsu's attention was focused on Shifu Yuan Orishi, Inoue Oraim and Nikon Mu. If he had known this, Senju Makoto would never take his employees on vacation at the beach today. Senju Makoto thought that his relationship with the employees was quite pure, but he couldn't stop the employees from having more explosive bodies and wearing less fabric in their swimsuits. It's okay. Nell is a very good and generous child. When she wakes up, I will comfort her and it will be fine, Senju Makoto said gently. Besides, with Yunahana-sensei's charm, I'm sure Nell will soon like Yunahana-sensei. I don't have much experience with children. Yuna Hanaretsu said hesitantly. Everything starts from scratch. Senju Makoto gently stroked Yuna Hanaretsu's long hair and said. This is also for Yunahana-sensei to accumulate experience in taking care of her own children in the future. Her own children. Suddenly, Yuna Hanaretsu's eyes, which had already returned to their gentle and elegant appearance, flashed with panic, and he almost blurted out. Who wants to have offspring with you? What? Senju Makoto never expected that Yuna Hanaretsu, who seemed to be indifferent to everything at ordinary times, would show such a shy attitude when talking about these issues, and couldn't help but tease. Yuna Hana teacher, I didn't say that you were going to give birth to my offspring. You. Yuna Hanaretsu heard this, and her chest rose and fell visibly, as if she was both angry and shy. Then, Yuna Hanaretsu's expression straightened, and she spoke in a tone of teaching. Makoto, is this how you talk to your teacher now? Such a rude attitude, I don't remember teaching you this way. Yuna Hana teacher only taught me politeness in front of others, but when we're alone together, Yuna Hana teacher will condone the offense of a disciple like me, right? Senju Makoto said softly, almost making Yuna Hanaretsu's elegant and serious expression, which he tried hard to maintain as a teacher, collapse. Then, Yuna Hanaretsu bit his lower lip slightly, and changed the subject in a panic. Makoto, don't be silly, the space of all things will soon attract the attention of the Seireitei, and some of the captains of the subsequent Gotti 13 will soon begin to be stationed in Karakura town. At this point, Senju Makoto's expression straightened, and he understood what Yuna Hanaretsu meant. It is almost impossible for the captain to release his Bankai in the human world without being able to hide it from the Seireitei. Moreover, the one who released his zanpakutō was Yuna Hanaretsu, so the support of the 13th Gotti squad will surely arrive soon to confirm the situation. Immediately afterwards, when Senju Makoto used his spiritual control and spiritual pressure perception ability to explore the surrounding situation, his expression changed slightly and he said, No, they are already here. After the Seireitei discovered Yuna Hanaretsu's Bankai, the captains who were originally scheduled to go to Karakura town could not even wait for the prosthetic body, and quickly rushed to the human world with their lieutenants. Now, they are not far from the beach where Senju Makoto and others are. Makoto, if you restore the appearance of Kurosaki Makoto now and we quickly release the power of our zanpakutō, will it be too late? Yuna Hanaretsu asked. It's barely in time, but it's meaningless. Senju Makoto shook his head and said, It is impossible to completely erase the traces of Yuna Hana-sensei's Bankai. In this case, even if you remove the ability of your zanpakutō, it will only make things worse. Yuna Hanaretsu looked at Senju Makoto, who was still calm and close to him, and asked, What should we do? Well, Senju Makoto pondered for a moment and said, The problem is not as serious as I thought, but before contacting the other captains, some troubles must be solved. Then, as Senju Makoto thought about it, the forest around him that covered the specific battle process between Unohana Retsu and Senju Makoto quickly disappeared. Senju Makoto reappeared safely. This also made Shiwu and Yorishi, Snippers, Nikanmu and Inuyaori clearly relieved. After all, when Unohana Retsu released his all-out power and completely showed a completely different appearance from the normal state, the oppression and momentum generated almost made the creatures instinctively produce fear like facing a natural enemy. The next moment, Senju Makoto appeared in front of Shiwu and Yorishi and others with Unohana Retsu. Unohana Retsu's blood-stained figure and the aura that remained on her body also made Shifu and Yorishi and the others instinctively reveal a bit of fear, and subconsciously took a step back. "Don't be afraid, Unohana teacher is just joking with us," Senju Makoto said gently. "A joke?" Suddenly, Shifu and Yorishi and the others couldn't help but reveal a full of weirdness on their faces. That terrifying aura and murderous intent, the eyes that completely regarded the rest of the creatures within the range of their eyes as pigs and dogs that could be slaughtered at will, it didn't seem like a joke at all. Chapter 589 Becoming a Loser. Unohana Retsu also cooperated by brushing the hair hanging in front of her back, revealing a gentle face that seemed to be unchanged from usual, and said, "I didn't expect to scare everyone, I'm really sorry." However, the contrast between Unohana Retsu's gentle appearance and the blood-stained posture in the eyes of others was almost indescribable. However, for this result, Shifu and Yorishi's eyes had a sense of expectation. Senju Makoto's special position in Unohana Retsu's heart had long destined this result to happen. Senju Makoto, Shifu and Yorishi slowly read the name, with a complicated expression, and then said, "Your battle with Captain Unohana is over, but you haven't yet lifted the all-consuming space. I'm afraid there is something else that needs to be resolved." Then, Shifu and Yorishi took a deep breath, handed Nell in her arms to Inuyaori, who looked a little confused, and then walked in front of Senju Makoto and Unohana Retsu and said, "Come on, it's meaningless to resist anyway, Makoto-kun, do whatever you want to me." This was clearly a word full of awareness, but it made Makoto Senju receive a slightly scrutinizing look from Unohana Retsu. However, although Makoto Senju didn't want to be caught in such an embarrassing situation, the problem of Shifu and Yorishi was undoubtedly urgent and needed to be solved. Otherwise, if Makoto Senju's identity was completely exposed, it would inevitably lead to unpredictable changes in the situation, and even Urahara Kisuke would report the matter to the 0th Division. As long as Hyoshogu Ichibei is not a fool, he will definitely realize that Makoto Senju is very likely to have robbed a part of the name decades ago. Then, Makoto Senju slowly raised his hand. This made Shifu and Yorishi clench his teeth unwillingly, and he couldn't help but slowly close his complicated eyes. Shifu and Yorishi, is he a smart person? There is no doubt that although Shifu and Yorishi acts quite willfully, Shifu and Yorishi is very sensitive and smart. However, due to her personality, Yorishi Shoin is undoubtedly a being whose emotions far outweigh her rationality. Therefore, more than 100 years ago, for the sake of her friend Kisuke Urahara, Yorishi Shoin could give up her position as the head of the Shoin family without hesitation, and fled to the real world with Kisuke Urahara and others to live a life of displacement and hiding. Profits and gains and losses have never been within the scope of consideration for Yorishi Shoin. The possibility of this scene has never appeared in Yorishi Shoin's mind in advance, but even so, Yorishi Shoin still subconsciously chose to test it out after accidentally noticing Unohana Retsu in Karakura town because of a certain indelible suspicion in her heart. But at this moment, Yorishi Shoin also realized that Unohana Retsu and Senju Makoto must be planning something, and she has become a hindrance that must be dealt with. It's really abominable, I've become a loser. Just as Shifu and Yorishi thought this with her eyes closed, the expected pain and loss of consciousness did not occur. Instead, the familiar and worn palm seemed to be caressing Shifu and Yorishi's head as always. Shifu and Yorishi was slightly startled, and subconsciously opened her eyes, and what came into her eyes was the gentle eyes of Senju Makoto. In an instant, Shifu and Yorishi had a trance feeling, and those gentle eyes seemed to overlap in two different figures. Whether it was Senju Makoto or Kurosaki Makoto, those eyes were so familiar. In an instant, Shifu and Yorishi's heart inexplicably sprouted a strong throbbing feeling. "Yorishi, what stupid things are you talking about?" If he could choose, Senju Makoto would undoubtedly hug Shifu and Yorishi, whose personality was almost exactly the same as that of a cat, and caress Shifu and Yorishi's back to achieve the greatest effect of comforting Shifu and Yorishi. However, with Unohana teacher right beside him, Senju Makoto naturally needed to be a little cautious about his behavior. Then, Senju Makoto carefully considered his words, and spoke to Shifu Yuan Yorishi as much as possible without touching certain red lines. Since you have already guessed it, why don't you ask directly, but go around in such a big circle? If it were you, I would never hide it. Shifu Yuan Yorishi almost subconsciously wanted to refute when she heard it, but facing Senju Makoto's gentle gaze, Shifu Yuan Yorishi recalled a little and found that after she doubted Senju Makoto's identity, she did not try to ask. Of course, at this moment, under the background of a certain atmosphere, Shifu Yuan Yorishi undoubtedly ignored the fact that normal people would never run to Aizen Sosaf to directly confirm such a question. Gradually, Shifu Yuan Yorishi's expression eased and asked, "Mr. Makoto, what is the truth?" The truth. Senju Makoto was also considering how much truth to tell in order to confirm Shifu Yorishi's statement. Let Aizen Sosaf take the blame, as an excuse. No, if that happens, once the next stage of the plan is carried out, he may end up on the opposite side of Shifu Yorishi. Instead of doing that, it is better to try to really gain the support of the Shifu family. With this thought, Senju Makoto's expression became a little more heavy as he spoke. Hikushuba, this name must be familiar to Yorishi, right? As the former head of one of the four great nobles, Shifu Yorishi's eyes condensed and nodded. In the past expeditionary corps battles, I accidentally became the master of name like Hikushuba. Name. Unlike Unohana Retsu, as a member of the Shifu family that has never been interrupted for countless years, Shifu Yorishi obviously knows far more secrets than Unohana Retsu. Name. Shifu Yuan Yorishi also knew exactly what it was. Instantly, Shifu Yuan Yorishi looked at Senju Makoto with eyes that revealed extreme shock, surprise, and a faint glow. Shifu Yuan Yorishi's reaction that obviously knew something also made Senju Makoto slightly raise his eyebrows and ask, "Yorishi knows the name?" Shifu Yuan Yorishi nodded, pondered for a moment, and spoke. "This is one of the important secrets that is only passed down orally in the Shifu Yuan family. It has a great connection with the Spirit King of ancient times. Name not only represents the extreme of a certain power, but also makes the existence that controls the name equivalent to becoming the corresponding embodiment. More importantly, the point is," Shifu Yuan Yorishi spoke in a solemn tone. "According to the information left by the ancestors, name is the first step to becoming a god. P.S. When I didn't go out to update on time today, I realized that I'm also a loser QAQ. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 590 Year's Statement, the first step to becoming a god. As soon as this was said, whether it was Senju Makoto, Unohana Retsu, Synopsis, Nikon Mu, or Inoue or Ime, they were all stunned. Although the God 13 has the name of the god of death, it is completely different from the concept of God. God, in the traditional concept of Soul Society, this concept only belongs to the creator of Soul Society, Huko Mundo, and the present world, the Soul King. Wait, suddenly, Shifu Yorishi seemed to have thought of something, his face changed, and he spoke. "Makoto, the monk in the legend is called the monk who calls you by your real name. If you say his real name directly, it is likely that you will be noticed in an instant." Seeing this, Senju Makoto couldn't help but soften his palm while rubbing Shifu Yorishi, and said, "Yorishi, are you subconsciously considering from my perspective?" Shifu Yorishi no longer cared about joking with Senju Makoto, and said in a serious tone, "Don't joke. If you're really targeted by the monk, reciting his real name will soon attract his attention. You have to move quickly." "It's okay," Senju Makoto waved his hand, comforting the eyes that fell on him, and said, "If it is in Soul Society or Huko Mundo, it is indeed not possible, but in the real world, this is the world of vessels. Name and vessel are completely different. The power of Hikushuba cannot reach the real world, otherwise I would not have tried my best to stay in the real world for decades." Upon hearing this, Shifu Yorishi's expression was slightly relaxed. Although she was a little worried, she still chose to believe Senju Makoto's judgment. After all, the information Shifu Yorishi knew was only passed down from generation to generation, but no one in the Shifu family has truly mastered the name for countless years. Therefore, Shifu Yorishi's understanding of the information about the name is limited to theory. That's good. Thank you for your concern, Senju Cheng said with a smile. After reacting, Shibuya Yorishi glared at Senju Cheng with an ugly and resentful expression, and retorted. I'm not concerned about you, I'm just afraid that you will get me in trouble. Yorishi can rest assured about this. I'm not Urahara Kisuke. Even if there is any danger, I will not choose to take you to hide and get you into trouble. I will definitely protect you well. After a pause, Senju Cheng felt a knife-like gaze stabbing at his back. Senju Cheng, who was used to winning over others in this way, quickly avoided Shibuya Yorishi's complicated eyes, and then looked at Inoue, Synopsis and Nikonmu, and said, Perhaps, in the past I had to get along with you in a different identity, but that was not because I did not trust the feelings and bonds between us, but because I had to make a choice at the beginning due to the situation. However, the bond between me and you has never been false. Even if I die, I will do my best to protect the people I cherish. This resounding, sincere and gentle speech undoubtedly touched the hearts of Synopsis, Inoue and Nain in an instant. Synopsis knelt down without hesitation on the spot, and his eyes could not help but reveal an unconcealable enthusiasm, and he said passionately, What I follow is always the will of the Master. To me, the Master is God. Where the Master's blade points is the direction I, Synopsis, will go. Originally, in Synopsis's heart, he had an extremely pure belief in Senju Cheng. Now, after hearing that Senju Cheng has truly embarked on the path of God, his fanatical belief in Senju Cheng has undoubtedly taken a step further. At this moment, let alone asking Synopsis to sacrifice himself, even if it was something like dedication or sex change, Synopsis would definitely not hesitate. Kurosaki teacher, no, Inoue was a little nervous, but she mustered up the courage to speak. Senator, Senju teacher, if I can help Senju teacher, I will definitely work hard. As for Nirvana, she didn't say anything, but her gaze on Senju Cheng did not change at all compared to the past. For Nirvana, Senju Cheng has become an existence that gives itself the name of emotion. This also makes Nirvana's emotion almost full of Senju Cheng's brand and traces. As long as Nirvana still has emotion in his heart, Senju Cheng has undoubtedly become the most important existence for Nirvana. As the rest of the people in the flower shop expressed their opinions one after another, the pressure gradually focused on the silent Shibuya Yorishi. After a moment, Shibuya Yorishi took a deep breath, raised his eyes and looked at Senju Cheng. Those beautiful cat-like eyes seemed to be exploring and confirming something, and said, Cheng, to you, what am I? A senior who once taught instant step, or an enemy who is kept by your side for protection, or a cat that you like? Before Shibuya Yorishi finished speaking, Senju Cheng interrupted. Yorishi, you overlooked one point. Not only to me, but more importantly, to you, what am I? After a pause, Senju Cheng showed a frank and gentle smile on his face and said, In my impression, Shibuya Yorishi has never been a person who cares about other people's opinions. For Shibuya Yorishi, she only cares about what she recognizes, pursues, and yearns for. These words undoubtedly instantly stirred waves in Shibuya Yorishi's heart. Sometimes, when you care too much about something, you will sink into it and forget your true self. Today Shibuya Yorishi is undoubtedly, this is the case. The next moment, Shibuya Yorishi slapped away Senju Cheng's hand that was touching her hair, then put her hands on her waist, and said with the momentum of a cat ready to point out the territory. Senju Cheng, you're indeed the most interesting guy in the world. Even if you have changed your appearance and identity, you are still so interesting. Shibuya Yorishi's sudden reaction made Senju Cheng slightly stunned. I will definitely settle the accounts with you slowly in the future for playing with me, but before that, I will never allow you to be killed by Hioshuga Wichibaya. So, Shibuya Yorishi's tone paused slightly, and her wheat-colored face was slightly rosy, and there was a bit of shyness that was difficult to conceal in her bold tone. Then, Shibuya Yorishi's body changed back into a black cat form, and then, ignoring Unohana-retsu's gentle expression that hinted at a warning, she jumped directly into Senju Cheng's arms. Chapter 591. That slight possibility. However, at this moment, Kuronko had the aura of a dead cat that was not afraid of boiling water. Unohana-retsu was very strong and terrifying. If he was serious, he might be able to kill him with 3 swords. But not to mention that he had irreplaceable value to Senju Cheng. More importantly, Kuronko also confirmed one thing in the all-conquering space, that is, Senju Cheng would protect him. Then, under the gaze of Unohana Retsu, who was already faintly emitting invisible black energy, Kuronko Yoichi raised his claws with pink flesh pat and pressed them on Senju Makoto's well-defined abdominal muscles, and said, "Mr. Makoto, since you have mastered the power of name, there is undoubtedly an irreconcilable contradiction between you and the monk of the real name. However, unlike the monk of the real name who has been lingering for countless years before the throne of the Spirit King, it is not certain that you can really take that step. Countless years ago, the Shifen Yuan family was forced to bet on the monk of the real name. This time, I bet on you, Mr. Makoto." At the end, Kuronko Yorishi's tone was almost solemn and serious. In response to Kuronko Yorishi, it was Senju Makoto's familiar palm that gently stroked. However, before Senju Makoto could touch him twice, Unohana Retsu came over gently and elegantly. Then, Senju Makoto felt his arms lighten, and Unohana Retsu had already hugged Kuronko Yorishi without any explanation. Although Kuronko Yorishi's claws tried to grab Senju Makoto tightly, and made a shot at resisting meow, this weak resistance obviously did not play a big role. And Kuronko Yorishi also fell completely into Unohana Retsu's arms. "Yorishi, we are both supporters of Makoto, so we need to communicate and get closer to each other in the future," Unohana Retsu said gently, and his palm also imitated Senju Makoto to gently stroke Kuronko Yorishi's back, but in Kuronko Yorishi's perception, if Senju Makoto's palm was like magic, every time it could always poke Kuronko Yorishi's most sensitive and comfortable point, making Kuronko Yorishi couldn't help but moan lazily and weakly. Then, wherever Unohana Retsu's seemingly delicate and white palm stroked, Kuronko Yorishi felt like being slowly cut by 5 sharp blades, and Kuronko Yorishi was so scared that his whole body became weak and collapsed in Unohana Retsu's arms, not daring to move. Senju Makoto, who didn't realize the truth, said with a little more surprise in his eyes, "Huh. I didn't expect Yorishi to like Unohana-sensei so much. She looks even more obedient in Unohana-sensei's arms than in my arms." Unohana Retsu smiled gently, and said while gently stroking the black cat Yorishi, "After all, Yorishi and I are acquaintances, and we know each other quite well." Senju Makoto nodded, and then spoke. "The other captains have arrived, let's unify our tone first." At the same time, outside the cosmic space, the 4 captains, Soifeng, Kakushansui, Hitsuge Yatshiru, and Zaraki Kinpachi, gathered together, and behind them were 4 vice-captains who looked ready for battle and Kotetsu. Seeing the bloody cosmic space that covered most of the beach in front of him, Kakushansui couldn't help but press his bamboo hat and spoke in a solemn tone. "Unohana-senpei's Bankai, all ending space, is really rare. Is Captain Unohana's Bankai like this? It looks scary, but I don't know who attacked Captain Unohana. Should we try to break in and support Captain Unohana?" Hitsuge Yatshiru suggested seriously. However, this suggestion made Kakushansui's mouth twitch, and he said, "Captain Hitsuge's worry is completely unnecessary. If Unohana-senpei can't get rid of the enemy in the all-ending space, we will probably be defeated if we go in." After a pause, Kakushansui couldn't help smacking his lips and said, "On the contrary, it is us captains standing here who need to worry about our safety at this moment. If we are not careful, we may face an opponent who is more troublesome than Aizen Sosok." Hitsuge Yatshiru was stunned and didn't understand what Kakushansui meant at all, so he asked subconsciously, "Why?" Kinpachi Zaraki, who had a kind of fanatical and passionate look in his eyes, licked his lips, and the spiritual pressure on his body seemed to be stimulated by some invisible thing, and it seemed that even a blindfold could not suppress it and continued to rise wildly. He spoke. "Don't worry about that kind of thing, just leave the next battle to me." Hearing this, Kakushansui's eyes flickered slightly. In fact, Kakushansui's attitude secretly was quite dissatisfied with the fact that Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni handed over the decision-making power of Karakura town to Unohana Retsu. Kakushansui could not deny the horror of Unohana Retsu. But this kind of uncontrollable horror, in Kakushansui's view, had no value at all. Not to mention now, even in the war with Ithwatch 1,000 years ago, Unohana Retsu, who was completely immersed in the state of killing, had injured many companions. Now, Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni is getting older and older, and the death god who can truly suppress Unohana Retsu in the entire Seireitei does not exist. Therefore, Kakushansui's attitude towards Unohana Retsu has always been respectful, but also fearful of this power that is difficult to control. Relatively speaking, perhaps Kinpachi Zaraki is a fighting beast with no other thoughts. Apart from fighting, Kinpachi Zaraki's value in other aspects is completely incomparable to the hexagonal Unohana Retsu. But compared to Unohana Retsu, who is likely to include all living targets in the range of killing when in a fighting state, the pure beast Kinpuchi Zaraki is controllable. In addition, Kokushansui is very clear about a secret from 1,000 years ago, that is, the reason why Unohana Retsu suddenly gave up the name Kinpuchi 1,000 years ago and became the captain of the 4th Division who only performs treatment was because he met Kinpuchi Zaraki in his youth in Rukongei. At the time, Unohana Retsu was deeply trapped in a state of having no opponents and finding it difficult to find someone to satisfy his desire to fight. He happened to meet Kinpuchi Zaraki, who fully released his fighting instincts in his youth and was much stronger than now. Fighting, naturally broke out. As a result, the teenage Zaraki Kinpuchi fell into a coma and was defeated, but a scar was left on Unohana Retsu's chest. Perhaps, the teenage Zaraki Kinpuchi was not as good as Unohana Retsu, nor did he have the fighting power to be compared with Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni. However, because Unohana Retsu saw a possibility in the underage Zaraki Kinpuchi who had not yet released his zanpakutō that he could fully satisfy his desire to fight in the increasingly boring Soul Society. Therefore, Unohana Retsu sealed his sword in a sense, waiting for Zaraki Kinpuchi to grow up. Therefore, in the eyes of Kokushansui at this moment, he saw another possibility. That is, to facilitate this battle and cultivate a better Zaraki Kinpuchi with the uncontrollable blood of Unohana Retsu. Chapter 592. Kinpuchi's Fateful Duel. Third update. With this thought, Kokushansui's eyes obviously fluctuated a bit. Kokushansui had quietly proposed this idea to Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni. Especially when the Zero Division suddenly investigated a secret in the Seireitei several decades ago, and Unohana Retsu forcibly rejected the Zero Division in order to protect the body of Senju Cheng-ge, Kokushansui realized a fact. That is, Unohana Retsu has no respect for the nobles, the Zero Division, and the Soul King Palace, and is not loyal to the Seireitei. In other words, Unohana Retsu will undoubtedly be the hidden danger in the GOTY 13. Therefore, at the time, Kokushansui secretly proposed to Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni to solve this hidden danger, but was scolded by Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni. At the time, no one dared to question the majesty that Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni had maintained for 1,000 years, which also made Kokushansui not continue to insist. However, with a series of recent events, the prestige of Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni has been damaged, and Kokushansui has lost all his face and reputation one after another. As the captain of the intelligence team, Kokushansui has a bad feeling about the recent change in the atmosphere of Seireitei. Although as long as Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni still sits firmly in the position of Captain General, then a little doubt is just an insignificant wave. But, if the prestige in Seireitei now, even if the reputation of Miyajiki is added together, it is far less than that of Unohana Senpai, this is a very dangerous signal. Kokushansui's eyes slightly condensed, and the fingers hidden his sleeves subconsciously flicked as he thought, and then quickly made a decision. Unohana Senpai has released his Bankai on his own initiative, so he is probably in an uncontrollable rampage state. Under such circumstances, I have secretly pushed Unohana Senpai to fight with Kinpuchi Zaraki. Even if the old man knows about it later, there is no reason to blame me with this thought. Just as Seireitei and Hitsuge actually questioned Kinpuchi Zaraki's reckless and inexplicable request for a fight, Kokushansui spoke first. If Captain Zaraki is going to fight with Unohana Senpai for the unfinished duel 1,000 years ago, then I don't seem to have any position to refuse. 1,000 years ago, an unfinished duel? As soon as these words came out, Hitsuge Itsuru, Seireitei and the vice captains present were all stunned. Then, Kokushansui told the relevant events of 1,000 years ago with a tone of emotion, actively creating a sense of fate. He gave the correctness and necessity to the duel between Unohana Retsu and Kinpuchi Zaraki, thus winning the support of the other two captains and many vice captains present. When they heard that Unohana Retsu was the first Kinpuchi who had killed countless heroic swordsmen and was dubbed Yakuchirai, and that the so-called 11th Division was first created by Unohana Retsu as the captain and then by Unohana Retsu's philosophy, Seireitei, Hitsuge Itsuru, and many vice captains, were all stunned. That Captain Unohana who had always treated every Shinigami gently and healed countless wounded people actually hit such a cruel and terrifying side. And there is a saying circulating in the 11th Division. There cannot be two Kinpuchis in the same era. Kokushansui said leisurely. Therefore, after Captain Zaraki took over as Kinpuchi, I knew that the battle between Unohana Senpai and Captain Zaraki would happen sooner or later, but I didn't expect it to come so suddenly. However, as the commander-in-chief of the secret mobile force, Seireitei, who had seen a lot of the dark side of the Seireitei, was not easily fooled by a few words. Seireitei's eyes narrowed slightly, and she subconsciously wanted to defend Unohana Retsu, who was Makoto Senju's teacher, and questioned. Wait a minute, Captain Kirku, so Captain Unohana has watched the successive generations of Kinpachi rotate without any conflict for thousands of years, so there can only be one Captain Unohana and Captain Zaraki. This statement is a bit forced. Hitsuge smacked his lips, thinking that what Kakushansui and Seireitei said seemed to make sense, and did not express his opinion. However, Seireitei's opposition alone was obviously meaningless. That's what you say, but this is a duel between Kinpachi after all, and it's not appropriate for us captains of the other squads to intervene. Kakushansui performed a Taikai move lightly, and nominally deprived himself and Seireitei of the position to interfere with the duel between Unohana Retsu and Kinpachi Zaraki. And as Kakushansui slightly gestured to Kinpachi Zaraki, Seireitei noticed that Kinpachi Zaraki seemed to have entered a special state of excitement, his eyes fixed on the direction of the all-enduring space, completely ignoring the existence of the others. Obviously, Kinpachi Zaraki in this state cannot be dissuaded by words, and if he uses force to stop him, without the help of Kakushansui and Hitsuge Shiryu, it is impossible for Seireitei to stop Kinpachi Zaraki alone. At this moment, Kinpachi Zaraki grinned like a beast, raised his hand and pulled off the eye mask on his face, and roared like a roar. Ha ha, is it finally come in? Almost as soon as Kinpachi Zaraki finished speaking, a huge hole slowly opened in the space. Unohana Retsu's bloody and extremely terrifying spiritual pressure, like a collapse of the sky, rushed towards the captains present, causing many captains and vice-captains to change their faces, and their hair stood up as if they had encountered a natural enemy. Breathe, it's hard to breathe. Even if you can barely breathe under such spiritual pressure, the bloody smell that seems to be real will instantly fill your chest, further stimulating your inner fear. At the end of the space where a hole appeared, Unohana Retsu appeared in front of everyone with black hair and holding a sword that seemed to be covered with thick blood. At this moment, Seireitei, Hitsuge Shiryu, and many vice-captains finally realized that everything Kakushansui had just said was true. The gentle and elegant Unohana Retsu that remained in everyone's memory was extremely terrifying. Just when everyone was shocked by Unohana Retsu, Zaraki Kinpachi's expression seemed to be completely crazy with excitement. He struggled towards Unohana Retsu alone and growled. Yes, that's it. Unohana, you finally took off the fake face that made me sick. Are you ready to fight with me? Come on, I'm ready. However, as a figure blocked Zaraki Kinpachi's way, Zaraki Kinpachi's declaration of fighting came to an abrupt end. Captain Zaraki, don't come any closer, it's dangerous. Kurosaki Makoto, wearing only a pair of beach pants and sunglasses, said with a slightly dissatisfied tone with his back to Zaraki Kinpachi. This scene also stunned the other Shinigami who were subconsciously prepared to witness a fateful battle. Chapter 593. Instant Kill. The appearance of Makoto Senju was undoubtedly beyond the expectations of the Shinigami. Wait, why did Mr. Kurosaki Makoto appear in the all-ending space? Could it be that Mr. Kurosaki Makoto is the one who just fought with Captain Unohana in the all-ending space? Yuin, what's going on? Facing the inquiring eyes of the captains such as Kakushansui, Seireitei answered nervously. Captain Unohana brought me here to find Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, and after finding Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, Captain Unohana asked me to return to Karakura town and wait for the arrival of the other captains. However, Seirei's answer obviously did not answer the doubts in the hearts of the captains such as Kakushansui. There is an extremely important point. Why did Unohana Retsu release his Bankai all-ending and completely end the fighting state? Facing Makoto Senju's obstruction, Kinpachi Zaraki blew hot air from his mouth like a beast and growled. Get out of here, Makoto Kurosaki. Makoto Senju turned to look at Kinpachi Zaraki, raised his hand to push his sunglasses, and said, It's you who should be the one getting in the way, Captain Zaraki. Please be a little more restrained when you act so foolishly. What? This voice, which was full of contempt, undoubtedly further angered Kinpachi Zaraki. The next moment, Kinpachi Zaraki's spiritual pressure burst out wildly, and he rushed straight towards Makoto Senju like a humanoid beast. His rough zanpakutō, which was covered with sawtooth, aimed at Makoto Senju without hesitation, as if he wanted to cut Makoto Senju in half. Seireitei, who was watching this scene from afar, subconsciously spoke to stop him. Stop, Captain Zaraki. However, Kinpuchi's Araki, who was on the verge of going berserk under some kind of stimulation, was too fast, and there was no hesitation at the moment of attack. Cut off everything that stands in my way. That's all. The burly Kinpuchi's Araki looked down at Makotao Senju in front of him, and his zanpakutō was wrapped with a huge spiritual pressure that had materialized. Boom. This sudden huge conflict instantly stirred up a large amount of smoke like a missile detonated. As the huge aftermath spread, even the surrounding sea surface was rippled at the same time. However, as the smoke dissipated, the zanpakutō in Kinpuchi's hand stopped about 10 centimeters above Senju Makotao's head, but he was unable to move closer to Senju Makotao. However, Senju Makotao's hand, which was originally slightly raised to block Kinpuchi's zanpakutō, froze in midair, and he didn't have time to touch the zanpakutō. And in the picture reflected in the sunglasses worn by Senju Makotao, it was the blood-bladed Koajin who blocked Kinpuchi's Araki first. Shinigami. This scene made many Shinigami who witnessed it stunned. After all, in the content just preached by Kikuchansui, Unohana Retsu, who released his Bankai and entered the fighting state, was a terrifying existence that would kill all the living things around him. And now, Captain Unohana, protecting Kurosaki Makotao. This protective move undoubtedly made everything Kikuchansui said just now seem like a joke. However, let alone the other Shinigami, even Senju Makotao did not expect Unohana Retsu to make such a different reaction from the plan. Only Unohana Retsu knew that his reaction just now was purely instinctive. As a wife, teacher, Unohana Retsu could not remain indifferent when he saw someone draw his sword and cut Makotao. More importantly, in the state of drawing the sword, even though Unohana Retsu could maintain basic rationality due to the presence of Senju Makotao, his body was undoubtedly dominated by instinct. And the instinct that dominated the body did not give Unohana Retsu any chance to think. The body reacted first and blocked the slash that was swung towards Makotao for Senju Makotao. Unohana Retsu's reaction was also very fast. His calm eyes that seemed to ignore everything turned to Kinpuchi's Araki and spoke. Don't try to get in between my fight with Kurosaki Makotao, beast. The next moment, when Kinpuchi's Araki's pupil shrank, he felt Unohana Retsu's figure flash, and before he could react at all, puff. An exaggeratedly huge wound appeared on Kinpuchi's Araki's chest, and even Kinpuchi's beating heart could be faintly seen. Countless blood splashed up like a fountain, and Kinpuchi's Araki's burly body flew backwards towards Kikuchansui and others, and fell heavily in front of Kikuchansui. And under such a horrible injury, it is no longer possible to stand up and fight simply by spiritual pressure or faith. What's more, Kinpuchi's Araki has undoubtedly left the range covered by the all-ending space, and he can't enjoy the spiritual activity enhancement effect given by the all-ending space. For a time, large pieces of blood spread from the fallen Kinpuchi's Araki to the beach, staining large pieces of blood. However, seeing this scene, the death gods such as Kikuchansui, Seireitei, and Hitsuge Toshiro undoubtedly felt a little embarrassed. After all, Zaraka Kinpuchi just now shamelessly claimed that the next battle could be left to him, and Kikuchansui also described the collision between Unohana Retsu and Zaraka Kinpuchi as a battle of fate. The result, instant kill. Instant kill without a trace of suspense. Zaraka Kinpuchi just lay down so neatly, without even a chance to make an extra sound. The gap is so big. You know, Zaraka Kinpuchi's combat power is among the best among the captains of the 13th Gotti squad, and he was killed in an instant. However, this also made Seireitei and Hitsuge Toshiro completely understand that Kikuchansui was not just joking just now. At least, the horror of Unohana Retsu as the first generation of Kinpuchi is indeed beyond imagination. Kikuchansui, who had been looking forward to Kinpuchi's Araki, was splashed with blood on his face by Kinpuchi's Araki who was lying down. He reacted belatedly and said to Kotetsu, "What are you still standing there for? Treat Captain Zaraka quickly, or it will be too late." "Yes." Kotetsu, who still felt a little dazed, responded subconsciously and rushed to Kinpuchi's Araki to use Kido to stop the injury from getting worse. However, the injury caused by Unohana Retsu's merciless and terrifying sword was so serious that even Kotetsu would find it difficult to complete the treatment alone. He could only say to Matsumoto Ranjaiku, "Vice Captain Matsumoto, help me." "Okay." Upon hearing this, Matsumoto Ranjaiku hurriedly stepped forward to assist Kotetsu in the treatment using Kido. Chapter 594 Self-Control. Perhaps, Matsumoto Rangiku is not a member of the 4th Division, but as the child brought back to Seireitei from Rukongei by Makoto Senju, the former vice-captain of the 4th Division, both Matsumoto Rangiku and Hisajishi have mastered a very high level of Kido due to their admiration for Makoto Senju. Seeing that Kinpachi Zaraku's injuries had finally stabilized under the treatment of Kotetsuin and Matsumoto Rangiku, Kamraku Shunsua secretly breathed a sigh of relief. This time, not only did he fail to fully stimulate Kinpachi Zaraku's hidden terrifying power through the blood of Unohana Retsu, but he almost killed Kinpachi Zaraku with a single blow, which was undoubtedly a loss for Kamraku Shunsui. If Kinpachi Zaraku died in front of him, Kamraku Shunsui would not even know how to explain to Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni. Then, with a serious expression, Kaku Shunsui looked in the direction of Unohana Retsu, only to find that Unohana Retsu did not continue to pay attention to Kinpachi Zaraku, but stopped in front of Makoto Senju. The appearance of Kinpachi Zaraku seemed to be just a trivial episode in the battle between Unohana Retsu and Makoto Senju. After Unohana Retsu seemingly casually chopped down Kinpachi Zaraku, the battle continued. Boom! The huge aftermath of the battle erupted. Under the control of Makoto Senju, hundreds of spirit swords were slashing at Unohana Retsu from all directions at all times. Unohana Retsu displayed a terrifying sword technique that even Kaku Shunsui could not understand, slashing down countless spirit swords that approached, and constantly approaching Makoto Senju. The fighting modes of both sides were undoubtedly different extremes. Facing Unohana Retsu, whose melee ability far surpassed Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni, Senju Makoto had no intention of approaching him, but maintained countless spirit swords and slashed at Unohana Retsu frantically at all times. Under Senju Makoto's spirit absorption ability that far exceeded the common sense of a quincy, the number of spirit swords he possessed was thousands, tens of thousands, and infinite. And what surprised Kaku Shunsui was that the hundreds and thousands of spirit swords that attacked Unohana Retsu at all times were not pure mobile slashing, but all seemed to have the shadow of Kendo. In contrast, Unohana Retsu was the ultimate one. Countless Kendo schools belonged to him, and his one body represented the ultimate Kendo. For a moment, under the gaze of the death gods, it seemed like a Kendo duel between infinity and one. Unohana Retsu's expression, which seemed to be calm and indifferent to everything, was visibly excited in this duel. The attacking spirit swords seemed to have turned into living swordsmen in Unohana Retsu's eyes, fighting with him. Great. Kurosaki Makoto, continue to satisfy me, please don't stop. Yes, that's it, a little more. For a moment, Unohana Retsu seemed unable to restrain himself and made a sound. That sound was not false at all, and Unohana Retsu's eyes seemed to become scorching. Originally, Unohana Retsu was just following Senju Makoto's plan to fight a battle, so as to create the impression that Unohana Retsu was satisfied in the battle with Kurosaki Makoto. More importantly, Unohana Retsu could also take the opportunity to reveal to the Gotti 13 that he was in control of the killing state, preparing for Unohana Retsu to find a way to seize the position of captain in the future. After all, even though Unohana Retsu had accumulated a reputation in the Seireitei that was second only to Yamamoto Seireitei Shichikuni over the past 1,000 years, the Gotti 13 would never allow a pure healing squad captain to be appointed as the chief captain. Only if he had the strength to suppress the entire Gotti 13 would the position of the chief captain be truly stable. What Unohana Retsu didn't expect was that Senju Makoto actually had this special way to satisfy himself. Originally, Senju Makoto's body had already given Unohana Retsu a unique sense of satisfaction. Now, these countless spiritual swords that seemed to contain the shadow of Kendo were attacking, and in Unohana Retsu's eyes, it was no less than countless times the happiness that was generated in an instant. At this moment, Unohana Retsu's excitement, burning and satisfaction were not a trace of performance, but came completely from the heart. In Unohana Retsu's eyes at this time, it was almost equivalent to teaching Senju Makoto all the Kendo, which would allow him to have countless endless targets for fighting. It's so wonderful. If it weren't for the fact that Unohana Retsu's desire to fight had been satisfied once in the space of all ending just now, Unohana Retsu would have almost been unable to bear it and completely sank into it. In the obscure glances that Senju Makoto sent several times, Unohana Retsu, who tried to break free from this sinking, quietly responded to Senju Makoto in a predetermined way. The next moment, in a tiny gap, Unohana Retsu swung out the dark sword in his left hand, blocking several spirit sun knives that were about to cut him, and then held all ending with both hands at the same time and pressed down. For a moment, Yuna Hanaretsu's figure seemed to have turned into a black and white flower that bloomed in blood. 8,000 flows secret meaning. One blade all ending. In an instant, a large number of spirit sun knives were shattered. When the Shinigami who were watching from afar came to their senses, Yuna Hanaretsu's figure had already stopped in front of Senju Cheng, and the blood blade in his hand was gently placed on Senju Cheng's neck. This scene represented a certain ultimate in swordsmanship, which stunned the Shinigami who were watching. However, what made Kikuchansui feel even more incredible was that Yuna Hanaretsu's sword did not fall, but stopped in front of Senju Cheng's neck. For Kikuchansui, who knew Yuna Hanaretsu's past deeds very well, this was no less than seeing the most ridiculous scene. In the past, Yuna Hanaretsu would never show mercy to the losers and the weak. Even in the state of fighting, Yuna Hanaretsu would kill everything around him under the control of instinct. And now, Yuna Hanaretsu actually stopped by his own will. The next moment, Yuna Hanaretsu took the sword in his hand from Senju Cheng's neck and put it back into the scabbard. His face quickly returned to its usual gentleness and elegance, and he said, "Mr. Kurosaki Makoto's fighting ability is really amazing." Senju Cheng seemed to be frightened and sighed. "Captain Yuna is so scary. At that moment, I really thought I was going to be killed. The pressure he brought to me was even far greater than when I faced Captain General Yamamoto." Yuna Hanaretsu covered his mouth and chuckled, saying, "Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, you are too kind." Chapter 595 The Weight of the Blade. As the all-ending returned to its sheath, the all-ending space that covered most of the beach completely disappeared, and the entire coast once again returned to its blue sky and white clouds. The terrifying spiritual pressure that seemed to be filled with the smell of blood all the time also disappeared in an instant. Only the gentle and elegant Yuna Hanaretsu, who was wearing long hair behind her, no longer had the terrifying posture from a distance. Instead, she occasionally covered her mouth and flattered Kurosaki Makoto, who showed admiration between her eyebrows. It was not until this time that Kikuchansui noticed that there were still several figures hiding in a corner of the dissipated all-ending space, including Inoue, Nyayunmu, Synopsis, and Kuronko Yorishi. However, due to the special puppet artificial bodies used by Nyayunmu and Synopsis, all the breath and spiritual pressure of Nyayunmu and Synopsis were almost completely covered. However, even Aizen Sosuk, who had secretly monitored Karakura town for many years, did not discover the true identity of Synopsis, let alone the possibility that Kikuchansui had noticed anything unusual. Therefore, Kikuchansui did not care about the presence of Inoue and others, and his attention was completely focused on Yuna Hanaretsu. He carefully approached Yuna Hanaretsu with Soyoifong and Hitsugei. No matter what, the Yuna Hanaretsu, who once brought blood to the entire Soul Society, was able to remain rational and show mercy in the fight. This scene was full of illusion in Kikuchansui's eyes, and even made Kikuchansui doubt whether everything in front of him was a falsehood created by Aizen Sosuk. Senju Makoto, who had his back to Kikuchansui and others, noticed their approach, and the tone of his voice, which was constantly praising Yuna Hanaretsu, changed, and he asked, "Speaking of which, how did Captain Yuna do it? I originally suspected that Captain Yuna had completely lost control and was in a state of rampage, but I didn't expect that he would show mercy to my men in the end." Yuna Hanaretsu heard this, her gentle eyes drooped slightly, and her palm seemed to unconsciously stroke the handle of the sword, as if she was missing someone important, and answered with a bit of emotion and resentment. "Alas, I used to have no worries, and the blade would naturally not stop at anything wherever it passed. But when I had worries in my heart, the weight of the blade would naturally change unconsciously." "You have worries in your heart?" Senju Makoto asked as if he was quite surprised, and Kikuchansui, Soyoifong and Hitsugei, who were close to a certain distance, couldn't help but prick up their ears quietly. People, perhaps when facing the living, they cannot realize the weight of the other person, but when the living person dies, as the weight of the other person disappears, they can realize how great the scope of the loss in their hearts is. Yuna Hanaretsu spoke according to the words prepared by Senju Makoto, but the impeccable gloomy and resentful expression made Yuna Hanaretsu's back look like a lonely person who has been waiting for his lover for hundreds of years. At this moment, not to mention that the death gods such as Kakuharasuk, Soyoifong and Hitsugei suddenly felt empathy, even Senju Makoto inexplicably developed a strong sense of guilt, as if he had done something too much. Then, Yuna Hanaretsu's gentle smile seemed to be a little more reluctant. "Therefore, in accordance with what Makoto thinks, hopes and protects, I will never allow Soul Society to be destroyed, and what Makoto once said is quite reasonable." The Soul Society cannot be saved by medical skills alone. Drawing the sword is the only option. After a pause, Yuna Hanaretsu bowed slightly to Senju Cheng in front of many Shinigami and apologized. I'm sorry, in order to try to control myself, I rudely and rashly tried my sword on Mr. Kurosaki Cheng. Please forgive me. Because whether in the real world or in Soul Society, apart from Captain Yamamoto, only Mr. Kurosaki Cheng has the possibility to resist me from completely releasing the other side. Senju Cheng heard this, and seemed to be a little uncomfortable with Yuna Hanaretsu in front of him, who had the style of Yamato Natsuko. His expression flushed shyly, and he quickly moved sideways to avoid Yuna Hanaretsu's apology and said, "It doesn't matter. It's good to be able to help Captain Yuna Hana. I also benefited a lot from the competition with Captain Yuna Hana." Yuna Hanaretsu couldn't help revealing a trace of desire in his gentle eyes when he heard it, and answered with words that didn't conform to the established arrangement. "In that case, I may have to trouble Mr. Kurosaki Cheng for guidance from time to time in the future." After all, just as Senju Cheng had no resistance to Yuna Hanaretsu's gentleness, Yuna Hanaretsu also had no resistance to fighting with Senju Cheng. And with that said, Yuna Hanaretsu felt that he had gotten addicted after a few days, and he could fight with Cheng in the most primitive and fierce way. However, Yuna Hanaretsu's series of words, which were carefully crafted by Senju Cheng, were no less than a depth bomb in the hearts of the other Shinigami. Admiration, longing, admiration. For a time, the eyes of many Shinigami looking at Yuna Hanaretsu changed like this. Combined with the story of Yuna Hanaretsu 1,000 years ago told by Kikuchansui, this made Yuna Hanaretsu's image full and majestic in the hearts of the Shinigami. He wanted to find an opponent in Soul Society but failed. Later, Yuna Hanaretsu chose to stop sword in order to wait for his opponent, and then became the captain of the 4th Division, healing countless wounded and saving countless lives. Then, the encounter with his disciple Senju Cheng made Yuna Hanaretsu, who was originally carefree, feel more bound and heavy in his heart, so he overcame his instinct with unimaginable awareness, and truly grasped the blade with reason, and then, with the weight in his heart, swung the sword. But, Seireitei's eyes unconsciously moistened again, and she felt empathy. At this moment, Seireitei felt that her situation, awareness, pain and sadness were so similar to Yuna Hanaretsu's. The appearance of that man changed the trajectory of her life, and she could only maintain what that man protected in this life. As for Kikuchansui, his expression was a bit complicated. If Yuna Hanaretsu could completely control his fighting state, it would undoubtedly add a pillar to the now precarious Seireitei. However, Kikuchansui could already vaguely foresee that Yuna Hanaretsu, who was all-powerful in fighting, strategy, and treatment, would definitely push Yuna Hanaretsu's already amazing reputation to an unimaginable height. At this moment, Kikuchansui suddenly felt that Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni's status was threatened, so that the smile on Kikuchansui's face became a bit forced. Chapter 596 Beach Vacation. More importantly, Kikuchansui knew that Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni's aging spirit was no longer suitable for the position of Captain General for a long time. In the past, Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni specially promoted Hitsuge Ayashiro, who had not even mastered Bankai, to directly serve as the captain of the 10th Division. In addition to the fact that Hitsuge Ayashiro was indeed an absolute genius of his age, more importantly, Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni hoped that Hitsuge Ayashiro could grow up as soon as possible. Then, Hitsuge Ayashiro, as the holder of the strongest ice-type zanpakutō, succeeded Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni as the Captain General. However, compared with the first-generation Kinpachi Yuna Hanaretsu, whose spirit seemed to have not been left with traces after 1,000 years, Hitsuge Ayashiro undoubtedly seemed so immature and uncompetitive. Moreover, in Kikuchansui's heart, he might have the ambition to be the Captain General. However, if facing Hitsuge Ayashiro who has not grown up, Kikuchansui may still have some hope in his heart. But compared with Yuna Hanaretsu, whether in terms of reputation, qualifications, strength, etc., he is almost overwhelmingly superior to Kikuchansui. The most important thing is that the noble class, which was originally extremely afraid of Yuna Hanaretsu, can no longer have a decisive influence on the position of Captain General. However, these are undoubtedly not ideas that Kikuchansui can appeal to. Seeing Seireitei, Hitsuge Ayashiro and many vice-captains take the initiative to communicate with Yuna Hanaretsu, Kikuchansui also squeezed out a smile on his face and cared about Yuna Hanaretsu. In any case, Hanaretsu now has the command power in Karakura town, and it seems that Hanaretsu can take the initiative to control his fighting state, which is undoubtedly something worth celebrating. Hanaretsu is as gentle and elegant as ever, communicating with the captains and vice-captains one by one. In an instant, the traces of fear that remained in the hearts of the Shinigami after Hanaretsu released his Bankai quickly melted away, and they felt that Hanaretsu was extremely reliable. Moreover, Hanaretsu's admirable awareness also won a lot of admiration and longing. Seeing this scene, Kuronko Yoichi, who was held in the arms of Inryo, twitched the corners of Kuronko Yoichi's eyes slightly, revealing a bit of dissatisfaction, and his eyes turned to Senju Makatao, who seemed to be obscured by Hanaretsu's light. "TSK, it's you, Makatao-kun." Kuronko Yoichi licked his paw subconsciously, thinking silently. As the initiate who led Hanaretsu and Senju Makatao to meet, Kuronko Yoichi knew very well that everything before this was an accident. Senju Makatao was also unprepared and had to find a way to solve the various speculations and troubles caused by Hanaretsu's Bankai all out. However, the troubles that should have been caused by the captains who arrived later to investigate Hanaretsu's Bankai, but under this series of guidance, Hanaretsu's reputation has been further improved, and Hanaretsu can draw his sword at will when necessary in the future. More importantly, in this way, Hanaretsu has the possibility of replacing Yamamoto Jinrai Shichikuni as the captain-in-chief. Kuronko Yoichi narrowed his eyes. After knowing a lot of secrets about Senju Makatao, he undoubtedly had a very clear judgment on the purpose of Senju Makatao and Hanaretsu's actions. However, Kuronko Yoichi was like an ordinary pet black cat in front of many Shinigami. He first jumped from Inryo's arms to the ground, and then flexibly jumped to Senju Makatao's shoulder. This scene also attracted the attention of some of the Shinigami, and Hanaretsu's seemingly gentle eyes also narrowed slightly. However, the arrogant Kuronko Yoichi did this naturally to declare something to Hanaretsu, so how could he give up under a look from Hanaretsu? Or in other words, the more obstructions Kuronko Yoichi's personality has, the more he is obsessed with something and desires it. More importantly, under the gaze of so many Shinigami, Hanaretsu, who needs to maintain his image, is destined to have no chance to attack Kuronko Yoichi. Immediately, Kuronko Yoichi lay on Senju Makatao's shoulder, and stretched out his pink little tongue like a pet who purely likes to act like a spoiled child, gently licking Senju Makatao. From the neck, to the back of the ears, to the face, it felt warm and hot, and the soft tongue matched Kuronko Yoichi's deliberately restrained bobs. The unique and comfortable feeling made Senju Makatao's paws unconsciously shrink strongly. Of course, the Shinigami who didn't know the identity of Kuronko Yoichi didn't think there was anything wrong with this scene. On the contrary, Izanagi and Matsumoto Rangiku, who had no resistance to cute cats, had their eyes slightly brightened and praised. "What a cute black cat, Mr. Kurosaki Makatao, is this your pet? So cute and well-behaved." Hanaretsu maintained a gentle and elegant look on his face, and there was no change on the surface, as if he didn't take Kuronko Yoichi seriously at all. Then, Hanaretsu spoke to the Shinigami with a smile. "This time, my rash behavior has disrupted your plans. Next, before the appropriate artificial body is ready, in order to avoid the interference of too strong spiritual pressure on the normal life of humans, it is not suitable to stay in the city of Karakura town. Then let's return to the Seireitei first." Hitsuge Ichiro said seriously. "That's not necessary." Hanaretsu thought for a while, glanced at Kuronko Yoichi from the corner of his eye, and spoke. "How about this? Mr. Kurosaki Makatao is on vacation at the beach. Why don't we just stay at the beach for a while? This will prevent the spiritual pressure from interfering with the humans in Karakura town, and we can rush to Karakura town at any time." As soon as these words came out, many Shinigami's eyes lit up. There is no beach in the Seireitei. And if you really want to go on vacation at the beach, you have to go to the real world. However, according to the rules of the Seireitei, Shinigami are not allowed to go to the real world without a good reason. Therefore, let alone a Shinigami with less experience like Hitsuge Ichiro, even a captain with nearly 1,000 years of experience like Kakushansui rarely has the opportunity to go on vacation at the beach. Now that there is such a good reason, and the one who took the initiative to propose it is Hanaretsu, there is no doubt that the captains and vice-captains present are completely moved. Soon, the Shinigami present changed their clothes quickly and started to have a pleasant beach vacation. Yuna Hanaretsu also changed into a one-piece swimsuit that showed off her charming personality and elegance, and then sat down next to Senju Makoto leisurely. Her eyes seemed to ignore the existence of Kuronko Yorishi, and handed Senju Makoto a glass of orange juice, saying softly, "Makoto, it's great to be able to vacation on the beach with you in human form. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 597. Shameless, Part 3. Chapter 597. Shameless, third update, Provocation. This is undoubtedly a provocation. The Kuronko Yorishi, who was lying on the shoulder of Senju Makoto, had a faint urge to spit fire in his eyes. Just like Yuna Hanaretsu could not be too close to Senju Makoto in front of other Shinigami, perhaps Kuronko Yorishi could use the convenient identity of a pet to get close to Senju Makoto and lick him at any time. However, Kuronko Yorishi could not show up as Shifen Yuan Yorishi. The former head of the Shifen Yuan family volunteered to be a pet for the queency to play with at will, which would undoubtedly cause great damage to the reputation of the Shifen Yuan family. In a sense, Shifen Yuan Yorishi was almost like a princess of the Seireitei. Once that kind of thing spread in the Seireitei, not to mention where the Shifen Yuan Yorishi cared about the situation that she would definitely die, what was more important was that Shifen Yuan Yorishi could not imagine how to face her own brother Shifen Yuan Yushiro. The sister who had been longing for hundreds of years actually became a plaything of a man. Shifen Yuan Yushiro's pure heart must have suffered a huge blow and pollution, right? The current situation undoubtedly makes Kuronko Yorishi exist only as a cat, watching Senju Makoto communicate with one swimsuit beauty after another, but he can't do anything substantial. Isn't this a kind of, before Kuronko Yorishi's eyes stared at Yuna Hanaretsu, and when he was about to turn around and sarcastically change his angle, Kuronko Yorishi forgot one thing. Perhaps many Shinigami, including Kikushansui, don't know Kuronko Yorishi's identity, but Seireitei is undoubtedly quite clear that the black cat lying on Senju Makoto's shoulder and doing all kinds of shameful things is Shifen Yuan Yorishi. Therefore, Yuna Hanaretsu glanced at Seireitei, who was staring at this place from a distance, wearing a one-piece swimsuit and showing her petite and cute figure. Then, Yuna Hanaretsu didn't wait for Kuronko Yorishi to speak, raised the orange juice and gestured to Senju Makoto and left on his own. Just when Kuronko Yorishi was still a little unresponsive to Yuna Hanaretsu's sudden departure, Seireitei's figure flashed and appeared in front of Makoto Senju and Kuronko Yorishi impatiently. "Urachi Shiuin." Seireitei squeezed out the name with difficulty from between her teeth, staring at Kuronko Yorishi with anger and disgust, as the object of her former admiration, although Seireitei had formed extremely complicated feelings for Yorishi Shiuin due to her abandonment, and then transferred all her spiritual sustenance to Makoto Senju. However, in Seireitei's heart, there is no doubt that she still retains some admiration for Yorishi Shiuin. However, what did Kuronko Yorishi do at the moment? In public, in broad daylight, she actually, shamelessly lipped Makoto Kurosaki. This, undoubtedly completely destroyed the image of Yorishi Shiuin in Seireitei's heart. Moreover, this also made Seireitei, who was actually quite pure in her heart, flush with anger. She stared at Kuronko Yorishi with anger and couldn't help but shout. "That's enough, you shameless demon cat." Kuronko Yorishi. This long-lost name coming out of Seireitei's mouth made Kuronko Yorishi startled. Seeing Kuronko Yorishi's seemingly unmoved appearance, Seireitei couldn't help but scold again. "If you don't want to shame the 2nd Division, the secret operations and the Shifen Yuan family, please stop your shameless behavior immediately." Kuronko Yorishi, who reacted, licked his paws slowly, changed to a more comfortable position and lay on Senju Makoto's shoulder, and replied, "No." Seireitei. In an instant, Seireitei was furious, and couldn't help but glared at Senju Makoto several times. This made Senju Makoto, who was constantly being pulled back and forth, feel innocent. "I originally just wanted to take the store employees to spend a good vacation on the beach," Senju Makoto thought helplessly. However, Senju Makoto had just tripped Shiuin Yorishi onto his pirate ship, so he would not let Shiuin Yorishi out of his sight in the short term to avoid Shiuin Yorishi leaking his information to the outside world with a very low probability. However, Seireitei was obviously not a person who gave up easily. While Kuroko Yorishi was confident that Seireitei would not reveal her true identity, she completely ignored Seireitei's scolding and continued to stay close to Senju Cheng, and Seireitei's firepower unconsciously shifted to Senju Cheng. As a result, Senju Cheng, who was originally thinking about petting Kuroko Yorishi, occasionally playing water fights with Unohana teacher, and taking a few glances at Taotetsu, Izaneo, and Seireitei's development problems, couldn't help but have a headache. After all, Seireitei, the girl, now undoubtedly treats almost no one with the slightest respect except for the nominally dead Senju Cheng. Unohana, who was strolling leisurely on the beach with an orange juice in his hand, walked to the side of Kotetsu, and glanced at Kinpachi's whose injury was completely stable but still unconscious. Unohana's eyes were mostly quietly looking in the direction of Senju Cheng, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. As the only seriously injured person in the entire battlefield, Kotetsu couldn't help but ask for Kinpachi's "Captain, can you find a way to wake up Captain Zaraki as soon as possible?" Unohana replied disapprovingly. "No need, let Captain Zaraki lie down and rest, and calm down." This unexpected answer made Kotetsu stunned. Then, Unohana looked at Kotetsu in front of him, with a slight smile on his lips, and said, You should also change into a swimsuit and have a good vacation first." Can I?" Kotetsu asked shyly, embarrassed and with a little expectation. "Of course, go ahead," Unohana said gently. "Besides, don't you like kittens the most? I have just agreed with Mr. Kurosaki Makoto that you can play with the black cat as you like after you change into a swimsuit. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto won't mind." "Ah." Immediately, Kotetsu's face turned red and said shyly, "Captain, but wearing a swimsuit in front of Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, wouldn't this be too rude?" "Don't worry, it won't." Unohana took a sip of orange juice and said to himself in a barely perceptible voice. On the contrary, Makoto would be looking forward to seeing his subordinate grow up to be like this. Unohana seemed to think of Kuroko Yorishi's face after being abused and humiliated, and a gentle smile appeared on his face unconsciously, just a wildcat. Chapter 598 Ichimura Jin's Enlightenment. The scenes that happened on the beach were also displayed on screens in the room of the Kainiac Palace through special spirit particle instruments. As the person in charge of monitoring the various changes in Karakura town, Aizen Sasuke naturally couldn't keep an eye on such trivial matters all the time, and Tosen Kaname was a blind man. Therefore, the only person standing in front of the screens at this moment was Ichimura Jin, who squinted his eyes like a fox and was completely unreadable. Ichimura Jin's squinting eyes were almost always focused on Matsumoto Rangiku, who was wearing a swimsuit and teasing Hitsuge Yachiru in the seawater. However, Ichimura Jin's expression did not change at all from beginning to end. Even at this moment, even if Aizen Sasuke was standing on the side, he could not see clearly that Ichimura Jin's eyes were looking at Matsumoto Rangiku. Then, Ichimura Jin thought for a while and recorded the relevant important information on the intelligence file in his hand. Unohana was suspected to be able to fight normally, Kinpachi Zaraki is seriously injured, Kurosaki Makoto's fighting style, some captains and vice-captains began to directly station in Karakura town. Perhaps, Ichimura Jin has no loyalty to Aizen Sasuke, but Ichimura Jin knows very well that he cannot show any flaws. Only by constantly paralyzing Aizen Sasuke and constantly gaining his trust, can he have a chance to forcibly take back the missing part of Matsumoto Rangiku's soul from Aizen Sasuke. But, when a certain figure appeared in Ichimura Jin's mind, the fingers writing the information paused slightly. Senju Cheng. In the intelligence information stolen by Ichimura Jin from the communication between Aizen Sasuke and Zaraki Fire, Aizen Sasuke and Zaraki Fire's goal was to break through the Soul King Palace and take back the soul of Senju Cheng. After learning this, Ichimura Jin's extremely tough heart began to waver. For the sake of Rangiku Matsumoto, Jin Ichimura has been enduring humiliation and getting close to Sasuke since his youth, constantly disguising himself and constantly seeking opportunities as a spy. For Rangiku Matsumoto. But once I destroy Sasuke-sen's plan and take back the Hojoku containing part of Rangiku Matsumoto's soul, how can I repay the kindness of Master Senju? Struggle. Just the emergence of this idea makes Jin Ichimura's tough heart constantly shaken and hesitant, and even the fingers that are writing the intelligence now tremble unconsciously. At this moment, Jin Ichimura is undoubtedly facing an extremely difficult choice invisibly. Betray Sosafrazen and take back the soul of Ranjaku Matsumoto, or follow Sosafrazen and take back the soul of Master Senju. If Jin Ichimura opens his eyes completely, the entanglement and torture during this period of time have already made Jin Ichimura's eyes full of bloodshot. Choosing one side means giving up the other. For Ranjaku Matsumoto, Jin Ichimura endured for nearly 100 years without any hesitation or wavering, but at this moment, facing the opportunity to revive Makoto Senju, Jin Ichimura hesitated, and even unconsciously leaned towards Makoto Senju. Whether the Seireitei was destroyed or not, Jin Ichimura never really cared. From the beginning to the end, Jin Ichimura cared about only two people who gave him salvation and warmth: Makoto Senju and Ranjaku Matsumoto. In this dark room, Jin Ichimura's eyes unconsciously looked up at the picture, teasing Matsumoto Ranjaku with a smile on his face. Churu Hitsugaya. Faintly, Jin Ichimura unconsciously clenched the pen in his hand. Maybe Ranjaku lost part of her soul, but at least Ranjaku is still alive and can enjoy the sunshine and beach. But if the information from Fuwaya Zaraki is correct, the soul of Master Senju is still imprisoned in a certain artifact in the hands of the Zero Squad. The soul of Master Senju can only be trapped in the dark environment in the artifact, lonely and waiting for rescue. Master Senju must be in pain now, and he must be waiting for someone to rescue him. Master Senju. Ichimura Jin slowly opened his bloodshot eyes and whispered the name. A certain realization slowly sprouted. Even if it was limited to an unconfirmed intelligence information, Ichimura Jin was unwilling to let go of this slim hope. Even if Ichimura Jin might really point the blade of his zanpakutō at his former colleagues and slaughter the Gotti 13. Even if that would probably make Matsumoto Ranjaku completely hate herself, but it doesn't matter. With this thought, Ichimura Jin's extremely hypocritical fox expression revealed an unprecedented solemnity, and he murmured. However, at this moment, the figure of Zaraki Fuwaya gathered beside Ichimura Jin. This made Ichimura Jin's expression change slightly, and he quickly returned to his usual appearance, tilting his head slightly to look at the guy next to him who made people extremely afraid. Ichimura Jin had secretly deduced the ability of Zaraki Fuwaya. As the former captain of the 11th Division, Zaraki Fuwaya's zanpakutō ability actually allowed him to easily master all changes within the scope of his own spiritual pressure and integrate it into the spirit particle. In addition, what Ichimura Jin paid great attention to was Zaraki Fuwaya's suspected identity as a friend of Senju Makoto. Why did Lord Zaraki come here? Ichimura Jin asked with an elusive expression. Zaraki Fuwaya, who was depriving himself of his emotions at all times with the help of Seireitei Kulai, answered without a single fluctuation in his tone. I'm everywhere, and in a sense I have always been here. This answer also made Ichimura Jin more vigilant about Zaraki Fuwaya. Extremely troublesome guy. As long as there is the existence of Zaraki Fuwaya, regardless of how strong he is as the former captain of the 11th Division, he can always monitor everything for reasons soft like the eye in the sky. Does Lord Zaraki have something to say? Or does Lord Aizen have any orders to pass on to me? Ichimura Jin asked nonchalantly. Orders? Yes, there are. Zaraki Fuwaya said calmly, and then walked to a close distance with Ichimura Jin, looking at Ichimura Jin in front of him without a trace of ripples. This also made Ichimura Jin, who still maintained an expression like a fox whose depth could not be seen, feel nervous in his heart, and frantically recalled in his mind whether he had revealed any flaws. However, Ichimura Jin has always been extremely patient and cautious, not to mention in the Kainyaku Palace. Even in the nearly 100 years in the Seireitei, he has never made any move that reveals his thoughts. What is the order? Ichimura Jin slowly opened his eyes a little and asked. The next moment, Ichimura Jin's wrist suddenly tightened, and it was grasped by Zaraki Fuwaya. Chapter 599 The Captain's Tendency. Ichimura Jin. His wrist was held tightly. This sudden and presumptuous action almost made Ichimura Jin confused. Lord Zaraki, what do you mean by this? Ichimura Jin's face darkened and he asked. Of course it's a command. Zaraki Fuwaya's expression did not change at all. He still held Ichimura Jin's wrist tightly and even began to rub Ichimura Jin's wrist faintly. This made Ichimura Jin's expression almost visibly covered with a layer of black hair, and he subconsciously suspected whether this guy in front of him had some evil habits. Ichimura Jin quietly held the magic gun with his other hand and shouted. Please respect yourself, Lord Zaraki. However, Zaraki Fuwaya's eyes were more puzzled and repeated again. No, this is an order, understand? Ichimura Jin. Just when Ichimura Jin couldn't help but prepare to fight back, he suddenly realized something. Ichimura-jin suddenly looked down at his wrist, and Zaraki Fuai's palm was still rubbing his wrist slowly. However, to be more precise, Zaraki Fuai was slowly rotating the bracelet on his wrist. That bracelet given by Master Senju, which has incomparable significance. More importantly, Ichimura-jin has never told anyone the meaning of this bracelet, and even Zaraki Fuai could not understand how important this bracelet is to him. Order! Order! Ichimura-jin's eyes slowly shrank, and an incredible idea sprouted in his mind. It seems that you have understood. Zaraki Fuai saw this, loosened his grip on Ichimura-jin's wrist, and his figure began to slowly dissipate in front of Ichimura-jin. Wait! In an instant, in the interweaving of shock, surprise, suspicion and other emotions, Ichimura-jin's expression rarely showed a few uncontrollable gaffes, and he subconsciously asked, "Do you know something? Are you clear? Is this the order of that lord? Is that lord still?" However, before Ichimura-jin finished speaking, Zaraki Fuai's figure completely disappeared in front of Ichimura-jin, leaving only the sentence. "You don't need to know too much now. Don't forget an important teaching and just wait quietly." An important teaching? Ichimura-jin's figure shook, and some clear images suddenly recalled in his mind. In the past, Master Senju had persuaded him more than once. Don't hold extreme ideas to do extreme things. You must learn to protect yourself well, Jin. In an instant, Ichimura-jin's bloodshot eyes could not help but appear a little misty. And Ichimura-jin also confirmed a possibility. Even if this was not an order from Master Senju to him through Zaraki Fuai, Zaraki Fuai also had a considerable relationship with Master Senju, otherwise Zaraki Fuai would not be able to know these facts that happened in Rukongei that no one knew about. At the same time, in the first division of Seireitei, the information about Karakura town was also quickly passed back by Kakushansui. Perhaps, Kakushansui had some small thoughts in his heart, but when facing his teacher, Kakushansui did not dare to add any subjective guidance to the information recorded, but objectively described the course of events. Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni browsed the details of the intelligence file of the 8th Division, and his majestic expression made it impossible to see any thoughts. Then, another special file of the secret mobile similar to a scroll was placed in front of Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni, and Suzuchojiro reminded respectfully. "Captain, this is the information recorded by the secret mobile." Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni nodded slightly, picked up the scroll of the secret mobile and checked the special ghostway symbol on it, and then opened it to browse. Comparing the two, the details of the description are slightly different, but the contents corroborate each other, and tell Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni a rather shocking fact. After Unohana went to Karakura town, he immediately sought out Kurosaki Makoto to test his sword and released his Bankai to fight him. Unexpectedly, he stopped by willpower when he was about to kill Kurosaki Makoto. Looking at the words of Unohana enlightenment recorded by Kakushansui and Seireitei, Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni's eyes showed some emotion. When the heart is free of worries, the blade will not stop at anything. But when there are worries in the heart, the weight of the blade will change unconsciously. Then, Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni stood up wearing the captain's Aori and walked out of the attic. Looking at the Seireitei that was being rebuilt and full of vitality in front of him, he held the railing tightly with his hands and murmured, "Captain Unohana, I didn't expect that after 1,000 years, you have also realized this. It is true that Unohana was once the greatest villain in the entire Soul Society, but how could Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni be a good person? The original Gotti 13 was a pure killer violence group in the true sense, and it did not hold the so-called name of protection at all. Until a battle between the Gotti 13 and the Sun-Crossed Knights, and the battle between Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni and Ythvak. Why did Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni and the Gotti 13 know very well that after Raijin Jaka performed Bankai, the heat leaked alone was enough to evaporate the moisture of the entire Soul Society? Because this is the fact that really happened. In the battle with Ythvak, Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni, who had no scruples, released his Bankai with all his strength, and finally Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni was slightly better and defeated Ythvak. However, Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni and Soul Society also paid a considerable price for this. The long-lasting Bankai, Zanpakuto, not only caused irreversible damage to Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni's spirit, but also caused the moisture of the entire Soul Society to almost completely evaporate, and countless residents of Rukongei died as a result. The tragic scenes and the destruction caused by the Zanpakuto are still deeply engraved in Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni's heart, making Yamamoto Jinrai Shibukuni's heart more kind and protective. Captain Unohana can be so aware, so I can be much more relieved about the problems in Kurakura town. Yamamoto Shinigami Shichikuni said slowly. And Suzuki Chojiro, who followed closely behind Yamamoto Shinigami Shichikuni, was just a listener and did not express any opinions. Chojiro, who do you think is more suitable to be the next Captain General? After a pause, Yamamoto Shinigami Shichikuni read out 3 names in a row. Hitsuge Yasuhiro, Kakushansui, Captain Unohana. Chojiro Suzuki lowered his eyes slightly and answered. When the Captain General asked this question, he must have already made up his mind. Yamamoto Shinigami Shichikuni did not continue to speak, but leaned on his crutches and quietly looked at the Seireitei in front of him and the more distant Cheng-ge. Chapter 600. Black Bat Bites. This beach vacation lasted for 3 days, until the special artificial bodies made by the Technology Development Bureau for the captain and vice captains were completed, and the Shinigami ended with a sense of unfulfilled desire. But during these 3 days, Makoto Senju felt that he had been tortured for 3 whole days. The beautiful scenery in front of him, not to mention how pleasing the swimsuits of the employees of his own flower shop were, the swimsuits of female Shinigami such as Ranjai Matsumoto, Yumiko Tetsu, Soib, Naneo Wiz, etc. made people's mouths dry. The rare beach vacation undoubtedly allowed the Shinigami who usually live in the rather dull and serious Jinkling time to completely release their vitality. Those energetic and charming Shinigami undoubtedly let Makoto Senju do his best to be the host and teach his Shinigami friends how to play the 18-style beach. Especially with the identity of Kurosaki Makoto, many Shinigami took the initiative to invite Senju Makoto to play together. However, not only did Kuronko Yorishi lie on his shoulder, but Unohana Retsu also gracefully swayed in front of Senju Makoto from time to time, maintaining a perfect distance and exuding charm, but also conveying a warning from time to time. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, let's play in the water together. I can't play at all, I'm afraid of water. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, do you want to play ball together? I'm allergic to the ball. Rejected again and again, the feeling of wanting to do everything but being unable to do anything, made Senju Makoto's will seem to enter a special realm in this crazy tug. Gradually, Senju Makoto felt that he had no interest in some worldly desires. At this moment, Senju Makoto understood, this was a brand new lesson that his beloved teacher had specially taught him. As the beach vacation came to an end, the Shinigami who had entered the mortal remains dispersed around Kurakura town. As for Unohana Retsu, he openly used the excuse of exchanging ideas on flower arranging to stay in the newly built courtyard of Makoto Senju. During the 3 days, Unohana Retsu and Makoto Senju had pleasant conversations from time to time, and the relationship between the two sides seemed to be quite good. Unohana Retsu's stay in Makoto Senju's residence did not cause any doubts. Although it was just a stay on the surface, in the eyes of Kuronko Yorishi, Unohana Retsu completely treated herself as the hostess, and had no awareness of being a guest in the courtyard. In the misty drizzle, Synopsis, Nianmu, and Inuyaoraim were taking care of the flower exhibition hall and officially started business. Unohana Retsu was leisurely sitting in the courtyard with Senju Makoto, drinking tea and arranging flowers, enjoying this dream life. The only thing that was a bit annoying was that in this elegant environment, there was an unknown black bat nestling in Senju Makoto's arms. However, unlike Unohana Retsu who was concentrating on arranging flowers, Senju Makoto couldn't help but glance at Unohana Retsu from time to time. Unohana Teacher's Sailor Suit Limited Edition, not to mention that Unohana Retsu didn't look out of place in this sailor suit, but instead exuded a feeling of perfect fusion of charm, elegance, innocence and gentleness. More importantly, this set of clothes is almost similar to Inuyaoraim's school uniform, and Senju Makoto also has the identity of a flower arranging teacher. This made Senju Makoto feel that the offenser and defenser had changed, and the teacher-student relationship between him and Unohana Teacher had reversed. Not to mention that after a beach vacation where he couldn't do anything, on the surface, Senju Makoto's heart seemed to be completely dead, but under the dead silence, there was undoubtedly a volcano that was about to erupt at any time. The black cat Yorishi, who was originally lying between Senju Makoto's legs, suddenly felt that his originally extremely comfortable position seemed to have something in the way. In a daze, the black cat Yorishi raised his pink claws and slapped it casually. Black cat Yorishi. In an instant, the black cat Yorishi, who realized something, suddenly woke up, and then looked up and found that Senju Makoto was staring at Unohana Retsu. This made the black cat Yorishi's heart suddenly have a complex feeling surging violently. It was as if he was his own ship-shoveling owner, but was about to throw himself into the arms of another cat. Under this complex emotion, the black cat Yorishi, who was originally a little hazy, opened his mouth and bit impulsively. Hiss. Senju Cheng instantly took a breath of cold air, and the whole person was completely frozen in place. With Senju Cheng's ultimate spirit body, unless Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni and Unohana Retsu, who were at the peak of the god of death, attack with all their strength, it is impossible to cause effective damage to Senju Cheng. Therefore, in the black cat form, Yorishi naturally does not have the ability to bite Senju Cheng. It was just that he was suddenly attacked, which made Senju Cheng's brain fall into a moment of blankness. But the black cat Yorishi was unaware of this and was just confused. He couldn't bite it. Subconsciously, the unconvinced black cat Yorishi faintly woo and the bite force suddenly increased. Ah! This made Senju Cheng instinctively open all the pores in his body, and he couldn't help but make a strange sound from his throat. However, even though this series of reactions was quite subtle, Unohana Retsu was sitting less than 2 meters away from Senju Cheng. Unohana Retsu looked up at Senju Cheng, and happened to see Senju Cheng moving the flower arrangement in front of him closer to him, blocking Senju Cheng's lower body. Senju Cheng's expression seemed to be a little surprised to see the unfinished flower arrangement in front of him, and there was a bit of distress and regret in his eyes, as if the flower arrangement failed because of some accident. What's wrong? Is there something wrong with the flower arrangement? Unohana Retsu asked gently, and then pretended to get up and go to see the situation. After all, this was the first flower arrangement for Unohana Retsu and Senju Cheng in the real world, and Unohana Retsu still took it very seriously. However, seeing that Unohana Retsu was about to come over, even with Senju Cheng's cunning, cold sweat began to seep out of his back. With the cover of the flower arrangement in front of him, Unohana Retsu couldn't see what Kuronko Yorishi was doing, but once Unohana Retsu came over, Unohana Retsu would definitely discover the truth at a glance. By then, let alone whether this newly built courtyard can be preserved, the more important thing is that Unohana-sensei will definitely go berserk and kill Kuronko Yorishi, right? Stupid cat Yorishi, what are you doing? Let go! Senju Cheng couldn't help but screaming madly in his heart, but he didn't dare to move his hands that were arranging flowers, for fear of diverting Unohana Retsu's attention. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.